The May 12th, 2021 special meeting of the Hawthorne City Council is called to order with all members present. We will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Interim City Manager Vaughn Norris. We can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Please stand, place your right hand over your heart. Ready to begin.
Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America
And
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome everybody. Madam Clerk, please read the guidelines for oral communications, please.
Pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.3, the public shall directly address the legislative body concerning items that have been described in the notice of special meeting.
Do we have any speakers?
We do not.
Okay, let's proceed. So what we have here is we're going to the City Council is going to interview 5 consultants selected by the City Council at the April 28th, 2021 special City Council meeting to proceed to the next phase of the process to engage a consultant to provide services in response to the request for the proposal and qualifications for the cannabis program implementation and related consulting. Can you pick up there, Diana, please? Can you tell? Well,
I'm sorry.
okay, no problem. I'll continue with till the end. So the 5 consultants that were selected at the previous phase were number 1, EGMA or EGMA. Number 2 is HDL. Number 3 is SCI Consulting. Number 4 is Herb Wesson and Associates. Number 5 is Cannabis Public Policy. With the selection today by the City Council of 1 to 3 finalist firms for additional interviews or other selection process, and the possibility of providing further direction to staff regarding the final selection process. Is there anything further from council members or staff?
Staff is recommending that we start the process with the interviews. We did receive some requests from some of the consultants to go first. Bear Demographics would like, Bear Demographics / Herb Wesson has asked to go first, followed by HDL also made a request to be in the beginning. So I placed them as a recommended second if the council is fine with that.
I just want to say in advance that I have to leave at 5 o'clock. I have a class tonight and I will not be able to stay longer than 5.
Okay.
I'm all for a short meeting.
Who was that? Was that Councilmember Patterson?
Yes, sir.
I'm not disagreeing with you on that.
To the chair.
Councilwoman, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to make mention that there's going to be additional questions that I will pose on top of any other suggested questions from staff.
Okay. So yes, let's try to make this as efficient a meeting as possible. We ask that our council member colleagues ask their questions as clearly as possible, or the staff ask the questions clearly as possible, and that the applicants supply a good, concise answer to the questions. Thank you. Go ahead, Greg.
Yes, so I'd like to call for the first candidate at their request is Bear Demographics and Research / Herb Wesson and Associates. If Mr. Chavez could bring them into the room.
Greg, can you please, Greg, can you please, before we start, can you just for the sake of the public, just state what the headers are, what we will be, what we will be assigning maximum points to?
Yes, so the City Council this afternoon will be grading the 5 candidates. They have been provided a grading sheet. The 6 categories that they will emphasize grading are organization management experience, experience working with public agencies, similar and recent related services provided in the past, overall scope of work understanding, professional communication skills, and cost. With those, our points are associated. All of them are graded at the maximum of 17 points, except for cost, which is being a total maximum of 15 points.
So what will that all add up to at the end?
That will total 100 points.
Okay, thank you. All right, so go ahead.
Mr. Chavez, if you could bring in Bear Demographics and Research and Mr. Herb Wesson and Associates.
All right, they should be joining shortly.
You have them in the waiting room, right? Eric?
They're here.
Okay, so got it. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Greg Sigiucci. I'm the Community Development Director. Bear Demographics and Mr. Herb Wesson will be the first candidates. Gentlemen, if you would like to introduce yourselves to the City Council, and then the council will proceed with the interview.
Okay, well, first of all, just let me say hello to everybody. It's good to see you, even though it's only virtually. I hope you are well, and I hope your family is well. Now, Greg, it's my understanding you were going to give us a few minutes to do an opening spiel. Is that still the case?
Yes, you can go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then the City Council can go ahead and, or you can present, and then the City Council can
Okay,
answer.
well, since I know we have limited time, again, let me thank each and every one of you for this opportunity. And let me just cut directly to the quick here. I know that there were some concerns where it related to politics and me being political. Well, I am not a politician. I am not involved in politics. I am a small minority businessman trying to feed my family just like millions of Americans. I am proud of the fact for 34 years, I did serve in government at a variety of levels. And believe it or not, in this case, I think that that should prove to be of an advantage to you, because I've sat on your side of the table, I've sat in your chairs, and I know that at the end of the day, your constituents, they're not going to hold the city manager responsible or accountable, or the city attorney or planning director. They're going to hold you, the leaders of the good city of Hawthorne, responsible. And since I have been involved in a process like this, maybe my firm and Bear Communication are value added in this instance, because we've been there before. I'm going to focus on quickly what we bring to the table. You know, we have had dozens and dozens, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, dozens and dozens of meetings throughout the city of Los Angeles where related to regulating cannabis. We have met with homeowner associations and the residents. We have met with the actual cannabis industry, and we brought in representatives from the 2 states that legalized and regulated this prior to the state of California and the city of Los Angeles. And even though this is very challenging and a new industry, we were able to do it, and proud of the fact that the city of Los Angeles generates right now $140 million a year in revenue from the cannabis industry. Before we left, we approved dozens of applications that are currently being processed. When that process period is over, the revenue that the city of LA would generate will be approximately $400 million. you name it, we have experienced it. I think I heard the last time you met and you guys had a conversation about this, references to social equity. Social equity basically was a concept that was created by the California Minority Alliance. They brought it to us and we basically birthed that baby. We are the second city in the United States to put in place a social equity program that affords people from areas that had to survive a failed war on drugs with an opportunity, a pathway into the business, and also provide them with the support that they need in order to be successful. We have been recognized by the American Planning Association. Cities from all over the country come to Los Angeles to see how we put in place the social equity program. And personally, I was recognized in High Times magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in this industry. The last thing I want to say, and I'll ask Andrew to pipe in for a minute if I forgot anything, Andrew, is that I also heard you guys reference not reinventing the wheel. I do believe that that's important, but the good city of Hawthorne is unique, and this needs to be done in a fashion that works specifically for you. Andrew Westall and I will walk with you every step of the way. And we believe that, again, this is a new industry and it's going to be challenging, but there's no one that has the kind of on-hand experience that we do in creating an operation and the regulations like this. And the last thing I will say, because I know Andrew won't, it's not like we set up and we voted to approve regulations. Andrew wrote the regulations that have protected the city of Los Angeles from lawsuits and other legal exposure. So Andrew, you want to just jump in and say a few things?
Sure. So my name, council members and mayor, is Andrew Westall. I'm principal and owner of Bear Demographics and Research. As you've seen from my resume, I've worked in local and state government for over 20 years and worked with the cannabis industry since 2007 in the city of Los Angeles. To Mr. Wesson's point, this was a unique issue for the city of LA, and where literally him and I did everything from writing the regulations, writing draft ordinances, coordinating community outreach, coordinating community meetings, bringing in various sectors of the cannabis industry in to speak to us and tell us about the issues so that we could understand as we were developing the regulations for the city of Los Angeles back in 2017 in particular, all of the issues that we needed to deal with. And certainly, we have as much experience, if not more than anyone else that you'll talk to today, because we are the ones that created and implemented the largest municipal cannabis market in the United States. The city of Los Angeles today is approximately 1/3 of the cannabis market for the state of California. And that's not just retail. We also have every type of business that you could possibly think of that's associated with this industry in the city of Los Angeles and licensed from testing labs and distribution to cultivation to delivery. And so, really from soup to nuts, we know this industry extremely well. We know the do's and don'ts of how to regulate them. And I think our expertise will be invaluable to the mayor and the city council and your staff in order to really provide a robust program that not only that the elected officials are happy with, but also the residents of the city of Hawthorne are happy with as well. And so with that, I'll be happy to turn it back over to Greg and start the question and answer session.
Sure. At this time, the council is free to interview the candidate.
I'll start. To the chair, Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, Mr. Wesson and Mr. Westfall, for the opportunity to meet with us via Zoom. And you're absolutely right in this time of change, but we're opening up. The governor says in June, we're back to regular. And it's my hope that we get back to the council chambers as well. My first question with regards to your opening remarks, I understood that there was 140 million a year that was being made as far as revenue sources that this is providing the city of Los Angeles. What's the population in the city of Los Angeles, by the way?
Over 4 million.
Over, what's that? The population again?
Just over 4 million.
Just over 4 million. You also made mention that there is a revenue source of 400 million. What was the 400 million revenue?
No, what we have is we have applications that were approved by the city council under our leadership that are now being processed by the cannabis department. When that process is over, then that revenue will increase from 140 million to approximately 400 million.
Okay. Really quick, how would you assess the tax rate for retail?
Andrew, I'll let you jump in and maybe I'll put a period on it.
Sure. So council member, in the city of Los Angeles, the gross receipts tax rate for retail is 10%. So it's twice that of what was adopted under Measure CC for the city of Hawthorne. And so in general, in the city of Los Angeles, an average retail cannabis business generates $700,000 in gross receipts tax revenue to the city of LA. So you can imagine that under a 5% rate, that in your average retail business in the city of Hawthorne would generate approximately $350,000 on an annual basis.
Okay. What license are the most beneficial? Would they be and also I want to know which would be the least impactful?
Sure. So certainly the retail businesses are the most impactful. And in the city of Los Angeles, we set up a process where we had one license for every 10,000 people in the city of LA. And unlike the city of Hawthorne, the city of LA has over 35 community plans. And so we also structured it by community plan, and so that you only had a certain number of licenses in each community plan. And so retail, because of its commercial activity, is certainly the most impactful currently in the city of Los Angeles. But once again, if you put in proper regulations and you have quality of life regulations in there, as was described in our handout, and you have good code enforcement by the city, then those impacts can be mitigated. With respect to businesses that are the least impactful, certainly it is the non-retail businesses, including delivery, because even in a delivery business, you don't have customers coming in and out of the business, and you don't have a storefront. And so whether it's non-volatile manufacturing, cultivation, which has its own issues, I'll come back to that, distribution, testing labs, which are extremely important and are still, still the state of California still needs more testing labs, as well as things like processing of raw materials, are all, once again, the least impactful businesses that the city could deal with.
Let me jump in for a second, Andrew. But you want to take, as a city, you want to take a hard look at creating a complete cannabis program. So I think that you want to look at the benefits of having manufacturing, cultivation, and your own testing lab. I think that it bodes well because they do create some tax revenue, but they create very good quality jobs that the residents of your city can be trained to perform.
Okay,
yes, I was just going to say, to Mr. Wesson's point, to give you an idea, your average retail job in the cannabis industry is about $20 an hour. When you're talking about these other businesses, you're talking in the $30 to $50 hour range. Certainly with the testing lab, because of the qualifications and the science degrees that are needed, your income certainly goes up even further there. Just the last thing that I would say is, in terms of volatile manufacturing, in which that's when you begin to involve the fire department and inspections and things like that. Certainly the city can set up a fee structure to ensure that there's full cost recovery and all of those. But certainly, volatile manufacturing, if it's not properly inspected, can be an issue, and that's what you see with a lot of these illegal manufacturing facilities that have caught on fire over the years throughout the region.
Right. I'm going to pose two questions with regards to cultivation and point of sale. So the first question with regards to cultivation, if we did authorize the issue of cultivation licensing, what tax per square foot is competitive tax, if you will, for the indoor cultivation? And this is competitive in state, right? In the state. What would be that square footage? More importantly, indoor cultivation that would both cultivate, be able to cultivate, the cultivator would then be able to be successful along with the city. So how do you look at that? How would that be measured as far as square footage and what that looks like as far as returns for both parties?
Certainly. So in general, in the city of Los Angeles, we went back and forth about using a square footage rate, and ultimately we came up with a lower gross receipts tax rate. And so, as I mentioned earlier, on retail, it is 10%, but with respect to non-retail businesses, it's 1 to 2% gross receipts tax. And certainly if that's something that the council chose, they could lower themselves even with the ballot measure. If the council wanted to do a square footage tax, certainly that would be something that would have to be returned to the voters. And at least in our experience, it's very difficult to calculate because it's not just the square footage of the building. Really what you're taxing is the square footage of the canopy that's located inside the building. And with the egress and ingress that's needed among the canopy, you're really taxing what that canopy is. Certainly that's something that's doable, but you want to have a rate that's competitive with the rest of the region so that you can attract those types of businesses as well. I don't know, Councilmember, if that addressed the second part of the question, but if it didn't, please repeat it and I'll be happy to address that as well.
No, I think.
And just to put a period on that, one of the things that you don't want to make this overly complicated for your city. And the key with the taxes is to try to figure out where the sweet spot is so that you don't overtax, and Lord knows you don't want to undertax. So that's always a challenge. And that's something that when you as a city get to that point, you need to have real detailed conversations about. And in the event that we were selected, we would make sure that we provided you with all of the information that you would need to make an informed decision.
And the last thing I would say to that, council member, is in the city of Los Angeles, we did put a restriction on the total amount of cultivation in the city of LA. And because certainly while the city wanted to attract these types of businesses, we didn't want them overtaking the industrial areas of the city. And so in the city of LA, you have a cap of approximately 2.5 million square feet of canopy throughout the entire city of Los Angeles, which is, roughly 20 to 25% of the industrial land, or at least industrial zone land in the city of LA. And so as the council begins to think about these issues, I think it's going to be important to do that so that you have the right mix of businesses in the city, and that the cultivators aren't the only jobs that you have in your industrial areas of the city.
And that's a good point. And there's another question with regards to zoning. The other question I had to do with the point of sale. So how often would that data from point of sale be shared? We're talking about a vendor, right? Retailer. How often would that be shared with the city? And what is the average blended profit margin for that retail business?
Sure. So in terms of the point of sale data, certainly the city and state law requires this as well, that the city would have have that data available to them upon any time of request. In the city of Los Angeles, we collect our gross receipts tax on a monthly basis, which is probably too often. At least that's what we hear from the industry, and it's difficult because, as you can imagine, most cannabis businesses don't have a traditional way to bank in the state or in the country yet, and so it's very difficult for them to do. And so, with respect to that, I think the key is probably quarterly, and to also make sure that you have a system set up in which the city can take cash, because most of this tax revenue that's coming into the city won't be by check because once again, because of those banking issues. And so that's certainly something to consider. In terms of the profit sharing ratio and that sort of thing, it's not something that the city of Los Angeles delved into very deeply. I think the key for us was trying to find a tax rate that we thought was competitive, and certainly at 10% is not competitive even in Los Angeles County. I think the rate that the voters in the city of Hawthorne adopted at 5% is much more competitive, particularly on the retail side. But as you get to, once again, these non-retail businesses, it's certainly something for the council to consider with respect to possibly a lower rate. In general, you know, we didn't really look at the profit too much, and really, and once again, it was that rate of what we thought that the city could absorb and still keep those businesses functioning and being successful. And so it's just not something that we spent a whole lot of time on.
Okay, real quick question. We just want to make sure everybody gets a chance to ask questions. We could try to keep it, right now it's good, it's okay. But just 1 or 2 questions from everybody. But go ahead, Councilwoman.
I think it's important that we understand cannabis program, and to do that, we have to thoroughly vet out the questions and concerns. So I appreciate that, Mayor.
Yeah.
I'm not rushing this program, and I hope that no one else is rushing this program, but this is what a good vetting is.
Of course, but we have 4 other people that want
I
to ask
understand.
questions. Okay, thank you.
And we
Go
might
ahead.
have to continue to another special meeting if that's the case.
Okay, go ahead.
How is the zoning work so that certain developments don't monopolize and artificially inflate the control of the industrial zones that ultimately are assigned?
Yeah, so certainly that's one of the most difficult things, is that once, you know, the city comes out with a zoning map and say, you know, we'll provide these types of businesses in these areas, unless there is some price control or some lease controls that is adopted via ordinance by the council. And certainly that would be something that we'd want to spend some time talking to your city attorney about and ensuring that we did it in a legal manner. But if there's a legal way in which you can actually cap the lease rates that they can offer for these businesses, I think that's how you deal with those price controls and those leasing controls and those inflation issues. Certainly, this is something that's rampant.
But like you said, like you said, though, that is a concern. It is a concern all over, and that's why it's very important to have a ongoing dialogue with the city attorney to try creatively come up with ways that can mitigate that. Sorry to cut you off, Andrew. I know you were on a roll.
No, that was the main point I was trying to make. So thank you for that.
And this is going to be my final question. 5%. Was that something good that we delivered to the voters at 5% versus you said, you know, you have 10%, and then just finally, what's the involvement, if any at all, with regards to policing in around cannabis?
So as I spoke to before, certainly I think the 5% is a very competitive rate with other jurisdictions in Los Angeles County. I do think that, you know, there's a variety of discussions going on at the city of LA with respect to reducing that 10% rate so that those retail businesses stay competitive. And so certainly with respect to retail, I think the 5% was a good choice. With non-retail businesses, because you're right next to the city of Los Angeles, where they have gross receipts tax rates of 1% to 2%, once again, depending on the type of business. And it's really cultivation is the main business that has that 2% gross receipts tax rate. You don't want to be losing jobs to the city of LA with respect to this industry, especially those good industrial jobs that have those higher paying livable wages.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Montero, and then Mayor Pro Tem Valentine, in that order. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Mr. Weston. And
Hey, man.
How are you doing?
I'm great, and you?
Good, thanks. So tell me, so you were part of this group since you've been with the city council in LA? How long you been with the group?
We created this group because I am no longer with the city council.
So how long did you create it? How long you guys been in business?
We've been created since the first of the year, thereabouts.
Okay. And so when you're talking about that, you have experience in all these creating policies and ordinance and procedures. So that was part of your job as a city council?
Yes, as the president of the city council, I took this issue and I put it in the committee that I oversaw. So I think as early as 2014, Andrew and I have worked on every aspect of this.
And so the contract with the city of Los Angeles, so it was since 2020? When did the contract begin?
I don't know if I actually understand what you're asking me. Our program in the city of LA has been in place for years, and we had a very competitive process, bringing in companies from throughout the region. But we, Mr. Westall and myself, were not part of any of these operations. We were part of the government that worked with them to create the regulation.
Okay, all right, I understand now. Thank you. So right now, do you have any clients? Like, like what other cities do you have? Do you actually manage the city of Los Angeles cannabis program, or somebody else?
No, when you work for the city of Los Angeles, they have a cooling off period of a year before you can do work with them. So we have a variety of clients. This would be our first cannabis client.
Okay, so that means you have not, right now, this company have not have no clients per se as an experience result.
But if you look at the city of Los Angeles,
yes,
look at 4 million people, you look at all of the retail, you look at the testing labs, and when you look at all of that Andrew and I were in charge of putting in place, that would give us far more experience than probably anybody on the planet.
And council member, to that point, just, even though we've only been in business and we have our respective companies for the last few months, I currently have 8 clients. My other expertise other than cannabis and ballot measures is redistricting. And so I do have contracts with the city of Alhambra, as well as the LAUSD and the Chino Basin Water Conservation District. And so certainly we have clients, just not in the cannabis space at this point.
Okay. And on your additional letter that you sent us this week, you were talking about that cost recovering of the program. Can you expand more on that?
Andrew,
Sure.
You want to just hit that and hit it quick?
Yeah, so in general, in terms of full cost recovery, I mean, that certainly is exactly what the city should be doing. And I said, in the way that we did it in the city of Los Angeles, we certainly have full cost recovery. The key is having an administrative permit structure, administrative fee structure in place that's adopted by the council that completely absorbs all of those costs. In essence, in the city of Los Angeles, because we set up a special fund by ordinance in which all of those fees and permit fees go into and all the fines go into in terms of code enforcement, that's what funds the department and the staff in the city of Los Angeles. The only thing that's not funded by that is illegal enforcement. And certainly there's a way to structure that for the city of Hawthorne to get back to Councilmember Reyes' English's comment with respect to policing, because really, once you have legal businesses in place, the police department is not really the ones that should be involved. It should be city staff and code enforcement. But if you do have illegal activity occurring in the city of Hawthorne, certainly that should be handled by the police department.
Good. Thank you. No further for now. Thank you.
Thank you, man, and be well.
You too. Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes. Good afternoon, good afternoon, Mr. Wesson, Mr. Westall. Nice to see you both.
It's good to see you.
Thank you. So community engagement and outreach is an important aspect of developing a program like this. How would you engage the community what would be your approach to engaging the community, to educating the community, to bringing the community up to speed with what this program involves?
Well, one of the things that I'm most proud of is, I think I referenced it earlier on in my opening statement. I can't envision any jurisdiction having as many organized community meetings as we had. We in the city of Los Angeles have a neighborhood council program, and in the neighborhood council programs, many of them created a subcommittee to deal with cannabis. We created an actual task force with individuals from the cannabis industry. And I also referenced that we brought in experts from Washington and Colorado, and we were very aggressive in making sure that the residents of the city of LA knew exactly what was going on. And one of the things that was most remarkable is that we had very minimal pushback from the community because they felt that they were in fact engaged. If we were able to get this contract to work with you, we would sit down, find out what your wants, your needs, and your concerns are, and put together one heck of a community education outreach program so that the residents of the city of Hawthorne would at least have a working knowledge as to how this was happening, where the revenue was going, how that revenue was going to be spent, and how it would benefit them. And I think we did a remarkable job in partnering retail businesses with community organizations where they work in concert in sponsoring positive programs for the community. Did I miss anything, Drew?
Just the last thing I would say is, as we did outreach throughout the city, we probably spent a good year before we actually adopted, any recommendations with respect to regulations or anything else. Certainly the city of Los Angeles is much larger than the city of Hawthorne, but we held meetings all the way from Southwest College to the San Fernando Valley in the evenings and the weekends. And so certainly we know how to do the outreach with respect to the community, and we know how to bring the community together with the industry, and so that there is a lot of synergy in terms of those community benefits and that involvement and interaction with the residents, as Mr. Weston just described.
Yeah, but I think the mindset is a little different. I think that we had in the beginning much more resistance. I think that you have a more open public today, more so than we had before. And I think a solid plan with solid benefits could be easy to market to the residents of your city.
Thank you.
Councilmember Patterson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just have one quick question, Mr. Weston.
Yeah.
What would you say would be one of the biggest things you learned about how to create a successful ordinance and unroll it to the community in a successful way where, essentially everybody wins? What would you say the biggest thing you learned about how to do that really only comes with experience?
It is really unique in that one of the very first meetings that we had, we brought in officials from Colorado, we brought in officials from Washington, and they indicated to us, no matter what you do, no matter how tight you think you've got this, there are going to be unforeseen problems. And so we listened to them. We said, yeah, all right. We go through our process. We put everything in place. And out of all of the meetings we had, the very early meetings, when they warned us that there was no such thing as a perfect process, that's exactly what occurred. But I do believe that the more engagement with the community, the more flexibility the council is in creating a program that works specifically for the city of Hawthorne, the better chance you have for success. One of the things that I'm most proud of is that we did create this social equity program. The reasons why other states did not want to do this in other cities is because it was hard, but it was the right thing to do. And we are now beginning to see the fruits of our labor. So one thing that I would highly recommend, but it is a head banger, a head scratcher, a pain, is to make sure that some form of a social equity program is put in place.
All right, so real quick question on my behalf. Can you tell us who the members of your team are and what additional resources you count on?
Well, it is Bear Communications, which is Andrew's operation, and Herb Wesson and Associates. And we have individuals that we work with from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, California. So depending, the only way that this works with, be it with us or any group, is that we work together as a team and a unit. So any needs, desires that Hawthorne has, we will be able to bring in the appropriate group of individuals to help us with that, be it individuals from the cannabis industry, be it a legal team. You know, one of the things that we're proud of in the city of LA is this was written so tight that we didn't expose the city to lawsuits, and any issues that we've had up to this point, we've been able to deal with. So whatever resources are needed for the city of Hawthorne, we have the ability to bring those resources in.
Thank
and
you.
Mayor, yeah,
Thank you
Mayor,
very much for that. Okay, go ahead.
Sure, Mayor. The only thing I would add is that certainly the two principals that are sitting here before you are the ones that the council and the city would work with primarily. And if we had other members of our project team that we wanted to bring in for specific issues, certainly we would work with city staff and the mayor and council to ensure that those were approved and were available to you.
Thank you very much to both of you. Our city council members were able to ask questions. We were able to go through the group. So I guess that's pretty much it for your turn. So
okay, last thing I want to say, you know,
close it up.
Alex, give my best to your family. Olivia, your son, other Alex, to your sister, who's a dear, Angie and LD, everybody. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in public. And I hope that you guys objectively give us a shot. Anyway, be well and stay safe.
Thank you. And you
Thank
too.
you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Much appreciated. Thank you for your time. Greg, can you proceed?
Yes, I guess, Mr. Chavez, if you could, after these gentlemen leave, you could bring in HDL companies.
Okay.
All right, so I guess we established a rhythm here. They get to give an introduction, and then we just go around the table with questions from each council member, okay? We do have 4 other groups, so as the council member Reyes English said, we might need to take this to another meeting if need be.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, I think the representatives from HDL are here. There he is, David. Okay. Gentlemen, if you could go ahead and introduce yourselves and a little bit about your company, and then it'll, keep that to 3 to 4 minutes, and then the council will go ahead and begin the interview process with you.
Sure, we appreciate respectful of your time. So my name is David McPherson. I am the Compliance Director for HDL. And with me, I have my colleagues, Mark and AJ, which I'll let them introduce themselves well. HDL has been around for 30 years. We represent over 500 cities and counties in California. And we've had the privilege of working with almost 200 cities and counties, specifically with cannabis services, pretty much A through Z, which I think we'll talk about in the interview questions. So we'll defer him to there. I'd like to ask AJ to introduce himself.
Sure, thanks, Dave. So my name's Ajay Kaluri. I'm the Deputy Director of Policy and Audit for HDL. I've been with the company for about 4 months now. Before I joined, I was the Cannabis Program Manager for the city of Long Beach, so just down the street from you guys. And there, I work for the city manager's office, assisting with all aspects of our cannabis regulatory program. By the time I had left, we had issued 200 permits throughout the city for all business types, retailers, cultivators, manufacturers, distributors, and labs. And I believe that Long Beach is now one of the leaders in this space in the state at this point. So it's great to meet you all, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mark, and kind of an introduction.
And my name is Mark Lovelace. I'm a Senior Policy Advisor for HDL. I've been with the company for about 4 years now. Prior to that, I was on the Board of Supervisors in Humboldt County for 8 years during the time that we were developing our first go-around at cannabis ordinances. We developed different ordinances in that time. I also was on the Board of Directors for the California State Association of Counties and spearheaded the development and creation of a cannabis working group, at the time, Medical Marijuana Working Group, which helped CSAC take its first stab at developing policies regarding this developing area of cannabis, and work with them to develop their first platform for the subject, held a number of programs at their conferences, and organized a 5-county policy platform for Northern California that helped inform the development of the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act. Since working with HDL, I've done a lot of fiscal analysis for counties and cities, helping them get a better idea of what the cannabis industry may look like as it fully develops within their region and their city, providing revenue projections, assisting with policy development, and a variety of other services.
Thank you, Mark. And just to recap, I didn't give you a detail on mine, and I won't go to the extreme, but I was fortunate to be the first person in the country to tax and regulate the industry out of the city of Oakland, dealing with the policies there, addressing where we are today with social equity and expanding it and on the war on drugs. So with that, we will turn it over to you to be ready for your questions.
Awesome. Okay, who would like to go first from the City Council?
I'll go first.
Okay, excellent. Go ahead.
Ask a similar question. What was the biggest lesson you've learned through experience implementing this type of program that would support us in putting together the best possible ordinance and regulation and unrolling it?
Sure, council member. So I think part of it is not only time. I've been doing this for 10 years. Again, when I was the first one to be thrown in the deep end of the water in Oakland without any other resources, I had to learn from scratch and grow a program when there was none, and then helping the state actually figure out what they needed to, working closely with the governor's office and the League of Cities and developing the policies. But I think what's more important, I think specific to you and looking for a consultant, is there's a lot of good ones, but which is the best fit for you, right? You got people that have worked for big cities, you got people that have worked in policy or governor's offices or done other types of analysis. We're unique that we worked with everybody. We worked with Long Beach, we worked with Fresno, we've worked with Modesto, I worked in Oakland, AJ King's from Long Beach as well, big cities, but we've also worked with the little cities that need the most resources, most guidance, need to understand the dynamics, and everything is moving every 6 months. And so you need to be able to move with that. Where you are today, think about where you were 4 years ago in this discussion. It's a different place, not only regulations, but the dynamics of what's driving the industry, but also what type of industry would be potentially for you, and what kind of people and businesses you want to be in your community based on policy, based on land use, based on where we are after COVID. So those are all unique things that we continue to have that kind of experience because we write fiscal analysis. We have all the confidential information of every retailer in California, especially for cannabis. We currently oversee and regulate for our client cities 1,300 cannabis businesses that we helped vet through background investigations, to applications, to policy design, to taxing, to helping the planners get things going up with the staff and public safety and developing. So that makes us unique in that perspective than most other consultants.
You say you regulate 1,300 businesses?
1,300 businesses in California.
What does that mean?
So you have state regulators that oversee the state regulations, but for cities that decide to have the businesses, they don't have the resources to do the compliance inspections, to do background investigations, to review applications, to do plan reviews for security plans, to look at security designs of things, cash handling, taxing, administration of that tax, doing the audits of those, transfers of licenses, looking at social equity programs, looking at policy trends that are changing on a day. We have a monthly newsletter that we send out to our clients, but I believe your city manager might be receiving, that there's a variation of things that we address and do that and oversee 1,300 businesses and troubleshoot issues with them.
Got it. And I saw you mention in your proposal that you guys would not be hiring anyone new to work with you in order to serve our needs. Is that correct?
Yes, we have 15 full-time employees that are dedicated to the cannabis because we do that much. I mean, our volume is so big is that we have that. We just have 3 of our staff here today that would be working, well, one, the primary that would be working on the project with you, but also just for the interview purpose.
And have you had any experience with cities being sued as a result of them just not doing it right?
Quite a bit on 2 sides of that. First of all, from the application process, pretty much every state, county, and city that has more applicants than permits has been sued, or there's been appeals or challenges. Mark on the other side has worked on, and maybe he can share with you some of the initiative challenges that we've done, because we've actually successfully knocked down 6 initiatives, and then we've had to implement about 10 to 12 initiatives for cities that already got there. Mark, you want to share a little spot on that?
Yeah, I've worked with, along with the policy analysis and fiscal analysis, I've also provided 9111 studies or 9212 studies. This pursuant to a section of the government code that allows when a citizen initiative qualifies for the ballot, the city or county has the opportunity to, before they make a decision whether to approve it legislatively or place it on the ballot, they can call for a study to be done. It has to be completed within 30 days to look at the impacts of that initiative and what it would mean in terms of actual implementation. And consistently, they're very problematic. And so being able to provide that kind of analysis for the city up front, be able to help them see what the specific problems are. In many cases, they've actually caused the backers of the initiative to withdraw them from the ballot because they become aware of how problematic the initiative is. So it's a process of helping to inform the city of, it's not just a matter of legalizing cannabis or allowing the industry. Each city, based upon the approach that they want to take, has the opportunity to shape that industry and figure out what's a compatible fit and what's going to work well with the city's values, with their land use objectives, with all of these different pieces that can make it a good fit for them.
Just one last question though. I would imagine with the city trying to regulate something like this, we want to have different rules that they have to abide by, or the licensees who have to abide by. I would imagine some of those rules and requirements would impact their profitability. And so is there, I don't know if you can speak to how hard is it to regulate, ensure a certain amount of public safety, make sure visually things are appealing, but still have licensees that will operate profitably in a fashion that will, of course, benefit the city as well.
So, Councilmember, we have vetted 3,500 applications for our client cities so far. A little background on me, I'm also a former law enforcement. I'm an Orange County Deputy Sheriff, Newport Beach police officer, and my first part of my 35-year career in local government before I went into city administration. I'm also the technical advisor for Cal Chiefs, and actually today New Jersey Chiefs are addressing some of these things that I'm working with Cal Chiefs on as well. Really looking at public safety, regulations have come a long way where, because we've drafted over 45 regulatory ordinances and 84 tax measures, and implementing those plus development agreements of almost 25 of them, is we know the best practices of that. If you look on our scope, we have done investigations or addressed issues of 17,000 businesses. We continue to evolve our ordinance development, even the ordinances we drafted 3 this week that has new information from 90 days ago that were unique to the common changes that are occurring. But at the same time, all of those are good practices that I think is healthy for the industry, and they're respective. We get very little kickback of our ordinances because there's that balance of what is good policy, but also is not a constraint to the businesses, that is not a reasonable benefit to them and to the community.
That's it for me. Thanks.
Okay, anybody else?
To the chair.
I have my hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, that's fine.
We'll go Valentine, then race English.
All right.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. I wanted to ask you specifically about the litigation that you were involved in with Chula Vista and San Bernardino. Can you speak to those briefly as to why those suits took place?
Sure, Tim. One of the challenges with the cities is that we have our application process of doing that. We have fine-tuned it so that we can pretty much reduce a risk factor. When cities develop theirs, they've got special reasons for doing that, but it doesn't necessarily address those litigation components. And the Chula Vista process was problematic from day one, the way it was designed by the city. But we had to follow their process as part of that. At the end of the day, though, even though we've been in litigation of 3,500 businesses, we've only lost one appeal, and we've never been sued. So back to my point about every state, county, and city that does this, where there's more more applicants permit, is going to be sued. It's just going to happen. There's going to be litigation no matter what you do for the most part. Our goal is to put you in a position that can protect you from or make it a defensible for you for whatever process you do, should you have us be involved in that role. We're not afraid to take on that fight. There's industry people that are going to sue you just for the purpose of suing you. Their whole objective is get you to create more licenses than there is. And that's hadn't you been, you were the consultant, weren't you? And didn't you develop the criteria that the cities were using? The Chula Vista process was designed by them. They had us go in and do the application reviews for them. The process was flawed from the beginning, which caused the problem. In the scenario of San Bernardino, the city did not follow the process. They circumvented it, and those that did not get a permit challenged the city because they didn't even follow their own process. It was not associated with us. Unfortunately, you hear our name in the news over it because we were involved with it. So we've never been litigated. We've never lost litigation, and we've never We've only lost one appeal and 3,500 applications.
Thank you.
Grace English, Councilmember?
Hi, thank you. Yes, Mr. Pierce, you just said you just lost one. What would that one be? What was the one?
The hearing officer basically indicated that, well, what the situation was is one business was docked down some points on a category where they got, let's say, 5 points. And as a result, they moved up on the eligibility list. So the hearing officer just concurred with them that a score we may have done that, you know, he agreed with the applicant for some of the information they provided in the hearing.
The other question I have for you, sir, is you mentioned earlier that you had 1,300 businesses with regards that you've worked with, having you know, concerns on diversity and other abilities to equally have a playing field for cannabis program. What is the diverse makeup of your 1,300?
So I'm going to first clarify is that we don't work with industry. We only work with government. In behalf of our client cities, we oversee 1,300 businesses. Of those that have gone through a process, I couldn't tell you the breakdown of those because a lot of those are cultivators in Santa Barbara County or up north. But for those that are in the inner cities of those, the diversity of those are the city's policies as far as how they approached it. We have in the last 2 years done more diversity programs. In our category that we evaluate as diverse, we call it diversity and exclusion in labor, that we evaluate it based on the direction of the policy. Some of them are looking at ownership changes for the cities. Some cities are only looking for the diversity and making sure they're hiring people that are from the communities that they represent and the diversity of those. So we make sure that those criteria are established in that. The social equity programs we have been involved with, AG has been involved with trying to get grant fund monies for a few, and then he had the ones that he's did in Long Beach, and he can share his experience with that. But we have built a good model now to streamline the process for social equity. The focus is resources to get through an application process, resources of getting property, and also trying to simplify the process for social equity applicants. So we've built a model now that is starting to be the new model, which we're using in Fresno as the big picture one. We had 75 social equity applicants go through that process, and we got good raves on how the process was done. And so we're slowly building that to recognize where we are today on what our clients are asking for.
Mr. Flory, thank you. I have a question for you. You mentioned you had 200 permits that are either lab, cultivation, or retail. Having said that, what license are the most beneficial in your opinion and or the least impactful to a city, especially something to City of Hawthorne?
I would say the least impactful businesses are probably the testing laboratories. They have a small footprint. They're responsible strictly for testing the cannabis products for mold, pesticides, heavy metals, other contaminants. They're also probably the most difficult to attract. There's not that many throughout the state. In Long Beach, we had a handful, but we were also early adopters. And so, you know, we were able to attract more than I think a community would today if they were only licensing that type or if they opened it up to that type. The business types that have the greatest impact, I would say, are probably cultivators and volatile manufacturers. Cultivators just because of the potential, although there's a way to regulate it to minimize this, but the potential for odor. Volatile manufacturers because it's a license type where if you don't do it right, it could create challenges and hazards for employees. Beneficial is a difficult question to answer, right? I mean, it depends on what your priorities are. If your priorities are to maximize revenues for the community, I would say retail probably has the greatest potential. If beneficial means granting access to medical cannabis or recreational cannabis for your local consumers and ensuring that that product is tested and regulated, then retailers would be beneficial in that regard. So it really depends on what your priorities are. But retailers are also one of the more noticeable business types, only because they're publicizing themselves, right? They want it to be known that they're in the community, whereas the other business types try the opposite. They don't want to be known, and you may not even know if you're living next to a licensed, distributor or a licensed cultivator if they're doing it right.
But you would agree that labs and testing is important to this type of industry?
Absolutely, absolutely. However, it's not essential for a city to have labs, because if you had, for example, a cultivator or a retailer in your jurisdiction, they would have access to other labs in the region. They operate, across the entire state, and so for the industry, it's extremely important. For any particular jurisdiction that's just looking at opening itself up to this business type, it's not essential, because at the end of the day, all product will get tested. It has to get tested. It will get tested at a licensed lab in the region. Whether or not that's in your jurisdiction, it depends on if you open yourself up to it and if you're able to attract that type of business to the city.
No, I like the fact that the state is involved when it comes to those labs and practices, right, to assure that there's a safe product across the board. My other question for you is, considering the city of Hawthorne being a city of 6.5 mile radius city, it's not that large, roughly 87,000. We're getting a lot more folks moving into Hawthorne. Having said that, what would you say is reasonable with regards to the number of retail should obviously that come up? How many would you think would be suffice and or not?
So there are very models to look at that. You can't just look at the city that you're at, but in general, our model recommends a ratio kind of balance of 1 for every 18,000 population. But it also takes in consideration your market share within your region. So you could be looking at, the density traffic situation in the LA area is that you're really looking at about a 30-minute radius of what they're at. And I say that because, Maywood, which is not too far from you down the road, 4 square miles or 6 square miles similar in square footage, has 4 businesses that are generating $50 million. And yet it doesn't base it on the population there. So part of the things that we do build fiscal models to look at what the potential revenue, but also what would be a sensible, reasonable amount of retailers to have for yours, that it wouldn't be an oversaturation, but yet there would be value added and not impacting other types of businesses in your community due to real estate.
Yeah, I think this would be important when you do ultimately the outreach and hearing community concern. All of that is important. When you tell residents here in the Hawthorne that you're not going off of the square footage here in the city or the population, that it's based off of somewhere else, they're going to shut the door immediately, not even want to talk to you, because that's how loyal Hawthorne residents are to what's in their city, what's allowed and what's not allowed. And trust me, we will hear from them. So that's important to know. But I want to go over to Mr. Lovelace. Thank you, sir. I like the fact that you were part of the co-chair of the county's medical marijuana subcommittee. I say that because back in 2010, I believe it was 2010, when I sat on the city council at that time, we were just in the process of implementing the planning department and our city medical pass-through delivery, and providing direction through ordinances that would speak to how many leaves a household could have at any given time. And so my goal at the time was to provide an understanding of some of the medical use behind cannabis and CBD and some other therapy, if you will, homeopathic. And I got backlash from that, from the newspapers, referencing, a drug user, this, that. It's all very nasty language, if you will. But having said that, and you did say earlier that little cities like ours need more help. How would you provide that help? And what does that look like? How would you describe that, Mr. Lois?
Mark, you're on mute. Mark, you're on mute.
just fixed it. One of the things that I think you're describing that both of us went through many years ago when this was still a new topic was just learning a new language about how to talk about cannabis. For 50, 60 years, the only language we've had around it has been one of values, and people have very strongly held values around this. They believe that it's miracle medicine. They believe that it's a terrible thing that shouldn't be in their communities. And as long as that's the only way that we talk about it, it's very difficult to get community agreement on it. And learning to talk about this as a policy issue and to be able to address it in terms of that people, their values, whatever they are on this, are right and are okay. And they're learned through their own upbringing and their experience in life, and that's okay. What we're trying to do is find a way that we can commonly, we want to keep it out of the hands of children. We want to make sure that the product is safe and that's not tainted with dangerous chemicals. We want to make sure that whatever portions of the industry are allowed in your community are something that the vast majority of your community can accept and agree with, and that it's done in a way that's tasteful and that isn't, an affront to the neighborhoods. And all of that requires that we have some level of community discussion, which all of you as council members are very aware of. So learning just a new way to approach it is one of the key things. Small communities and large communities too. People have a strong sense of their community, and in local government, there's no place in government that has as direct connection to your constituents as cities and counties, and your constituents will tell you what they feel on it. So that's an important part in the upfront discussion of it, and then being able to find common ground and ways to move forward and develop policies and programs that can allow people to feel good about what the city's doing, and ensure them that the industry that is going to come in is going to be well regulated, is going to be a good fit, is not going to increase crime, and that we're going to accomplish goals that the vast majority of people in the community can all get behind.
Can any of you speak on the benefits that cannabis has on communities, such as community benefits to police, to fire, to public safety, to communities that benefit, such as schools, nonprofit organizations, baseball clubs, basketball clubs? What has been the successes of some of those nonprofit organizations benefiting from the benefits of cannabis?
One of the things I wanted to share with you when we're done today, actually at 5:30 today, I'm actually in the Santa Barbara area in the city of Guadalupe, town of 8,000, 85% Hispanic. Most of them don't speak English. We're talking to them about those community benefits. What's important to you? What's important to someone up north versus south versus the LA area versus the Bay Area? There's different needs. It could be homeless, it could be daycare, it could be jobs for certain types of activities. There's some uniqueness to that. And we've seen some great things being done, businesses having those conversations with the communities and looking at them. It has good quality living wage jobs. We've seen businesses do third graders first, where they put iPads in every third grader's hand in elementary schools. We've seen them where they sponsored and as association rented a daycare and contracted for someone to manage it when you had people in need that can't get off work on time to provide them services for daycare. We've seen it where they provided food, homeless shelters, worked on things, special events for the community based on need. And this industry has gotten very savvy to get intimately to understanding what those community benefits are. So when they apply for those cities, they are very knowledgeable and personalize it to that city, not just take a generic what it is, because it does vary from city to city, although we would think they're all the common areas.
Oh, well, absolutely. I would be willing to put a clause in those applications that commit to 100,000 a year in benefits. And that's something that I will push. Mr. Kaluri, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. You mentioned earlier that you were with the city of Long Beach, and you had some great successes in implementation of cannabis. How often would the data from the point of sales, the POS, be shared with the city? And what is the average blended profit margin for retail?
So we, as a city, did not have access to point of sale systems. We relied upon our auditors to access those records, to review them, and to ensure that the businesses were reporting their gross receipts accurately to the city and therefore remitting the proper tax amounts to the city. I can say though, since leaving the city, that working for HDL, I am accessing point of sale records directly because HDL, as one of our services, provides audit services to businesses. We get direct access to those point of sale systems. We have familiarity with the vast majority of systems that those businesses use. We don't calculate profits. That's not as relevant for the city's gross receipts taxes, only because it's a percentage of all of the revenues, not just their profit margins. So I'm not as familiar with the exact profit margins of cannabis businesses and the different types. But I can say that that we have a lot of familiarity with accessing those records in businesses and can provide that same service to the city of Hawthorne as well.
And through auditing, you said, right?
Through auditing, yes. That's the main tool that cities
Right.
use to access the business records.
Mr. McPherson, my last question, and I just lost it. I wanted to speak on what the potential cost for an applicant to apply for cannabis would be something to consider here in the city of Hawthorne. Somebody applies, what that cost, what would that cost them?
Sure. So one of the things that we do is a cost analysis or a fit gap analysis where it would be consultants costs, burden costs of staff. You know, if you have a contract attorney, we look at everything of how to incorporate that cost to make the city 100% whole on that. I will tell you, probably, you know, in today's market, depending on it, on average, you're looking at between $10,000 and $11,000 per applicant. And again, there's variables based on you know what else you throw in there that you're trying to include. And that's just to make, you know, again, it's a fee to make you 100% cost recovery, which would include all any kind of costs that we can identify. But that's what they've been averaging in the last 2 years.
You know, I work for the city of Los Angeles, and I've been with the city of Los Angeles a very long time. Started in let me see, I can't even remember, 2000, 99, 2000. Left and then came back. So I've been with the city for a long time, and I've seen what has been happening with regards to cannabis. We're aware of the 15 council districts of all the bad actors, and we're aware of all the good actors, all those that followed the rule of thumb and did exactly what they were supposed to do. And that's important. But with regards to the application fee, I think I agree with you on that. The other thing that provided right now, lots of concerns for folks that are trying to get their business licenses. The city, from what I understood, made these folks go and get a location, and they were paying rent on these locations. Come to find out, they were never selected. So why would anybody want to do that? I mean, that's just obvious that we don't want to reinvent anything, right? We don't want to reinvent any issues or problems. But wouldn't you agree that that's the wrong thing to do, is ultimately giving false hope to someone?
Well, there's two ways of looking at it. It's a matter of how long it takes. For example, not requiring a property, the whole focus around you is going to be of where these businesses are at, right? Your community wants to know where someone's going to be before they do that. So a property becomes very critical. On the other side, if you don't do it, and I'll use the example in Pasadena. Pasadena only knew they had 3 licenses available, and they did not require a land use requirement as part of the application. They ended up with 122 applicants. Wow. Well, they're only going to make 2 of them happy. The rest of them were going to sue or appeal, right? So they were just fighting each other to figure out how to get to at least in that thing. So that's the negative of not having it tied to a land. One, you don't know where they're going to end up being. And secondly, you just get more people in the game. They're going to challenge the process because you've created a bigger opening for them to take their chance on doing it. They pretty much know it's the cost of doing business to get there. However, with our process, our goal is to streamline it and not stretch it out. And with our expertise, we can review an application. We get, 50, like Oxnard, we had 51 applicants. We had them done in 45 days. They completed the whole process in less than 60 days. Interviews of 50 businesses, review applications, background investigations, and the city making a decision who's going to get the 12 permits. Other cities can't do that or don't have resources, and it drags out to a year or whatever. And then people are sitting on property leases or contingent leases, and that's where it gets very costly. And we're mindful of that.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your time and your proposal.
Councilmember Montero. Councilmember Montero?
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. I think Ms. English have gone through a lot of questions that I had in my mind, but let me just ask you this question. How is your, because you said you work with a lot of cities, how do you work with the staff? How do you train the staff that the later round is going to take the ownership of the program? So, or you guys just stay there for to administer everything, or you just pass the baton? So how do you work to train staff?
Good question, council member. We're there to fill the need that you want. Wherever you have deficiency, we can fill. If you want staff to be intimately involved with this, we invest in them, we train them, depending on where that is in the process, be it on the back end, be it on the front end, in the middle. We have experts from every angle that you can do training and provide that. And we do that, be it the police department, be it your planning department, your code department, city staff, city manager staff, your finance staff, whatever your expectation is for your staff to do, and you want them to have the skill set to do that, we are capable of training them for wherever you want them to do that and complement whatever they can't do. We are not here to pitch services here. You are one of our clients of 500. Our goal is to provide you services to make you better. We recognize there is a need and a limited resource to do things, and we want to fill that void where you want us to fit, not try to come in and take over your program. And we have clients at up and down at different levels, and we just fill that void where we do, and we train them where they need it.
Okay, so just clarifying quick for me, why did you choose to give us these 5 references of City of Modesto, Fresno, Monterey, City of Port Miami, and City of Maywood, and you didn't mention Oakland and Long Beach?
For 2 reasons. One is there's different sections of the scope that you were asking for: community outreach, fiscal analysis, audits and compliance. So we use a reference for each one of the sections in which you were asking for some type of activity, so that you would get a flavor of our ability to do the different things in the scope, not just everyone. I mean, I could have put Maywood in there, Culver City in there, Pico Rivera, San Fernando, Long Beach, right? We were looking at it from what you were asking in the scope and make sure you had a reference for each one of the different functions that we did those activities.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for your time. I guess some of the questions I was going to ask were mentioned by some of my council member colleagues. So,
okay, we appreciate time and letting us be here, the opportunity to speak to you today, and look forward to hearing back from you when you're ready.
Thank you
for the discussion. Thank you. Take care.
Mayor, to the chair, I have a question for you, Mayor. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was good. I think it might be what I'm thinking, but go ahead.
Okay. Take care.
Oh no, yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Tell me what you're saying. About the time or what?
No. Well, the time too, but we have a roster, right, that we have on our desk that we're supposed to be grading the consultants. We're asking the questions, but there's not a question on cost. No one has asked a question yet on cost. Are we supposed to ask the consultants that we're interviewing how much they would cost us if selected?
Well, it is right down on black. It is right down the proposal. The one thing that they are saying, and that's what I'm not asking question about, because they're talking about if they're going to create the program, is a recovering cost.
That's after implementation. That's
exactly. So that is where I'm not too worried about the cost, how much it's going to cost us if it's 15,000 or 11,000, because they are going, after we create a program, it's going to be recovered based on our application, all the fees we're going to get. So we will not be the money that we could maybe pay them up front from our general fund, but that is going to be recovered back.
Yeah.
So
And then-
that's what I'm not asking question about the cost.
And then the other thing, Mayor, I wish we would have split up the 5 into 2 days.
Yeah, now I think it's too late, because now you cannot let those other go, because these other people can go back and look at the YouTube and know what we're asking. So it would be disadvantage.
But we do have one of our council member colleagues that needs has something. I know.
It's
but the thing is,
complicated, to tell you the truth.
and the reality is we do have these three. And
Yep.
How any suggestions, Mr. Greg or City Manager? How we could speed this up and get through this and still have our council member colleague Valentine see this and be able to make her grading. Greg, yeah, no, that question was for you, Greg, or for Vaughn?
Well, I can speak in the open, and Greg, you can critique what my thoughts are. The questions that were posed are transparent. So the remaining members waiting, those questions have to be answered. And I don't know, I think they would have to be forthright with that. I'm not sure if that would give them any more, leverage than anyone else, because the questions have been changed or modified by different council members. So
I have a comment. I have a comment real quick. Are all the applicants, did they have the ability to hear everything that was being asked? Were they listening to, have they all listened to the questions that have been asked? Because what they could do is kind of go through, address each of those, all the majority of the questions that have been asked up to this point.
Well, they cannot hear us because Eric is putting them on a room, right?
That's what I'm asking. Yeah.
No.
But the public can hear us, correct?
The public, and then later on they can go on YouTube and find out.
But if they
let them go.
If they've been listening to the questions that have been asked, they can address them right now. And if they've had the ability to hear it through our live, just our live presentation, they could go ahead and ask. How about let's go? Do you want to
go to the next one?
Chair?
We'll go, I mean, we could go ahead.
Mr. City Manager? Yeah.
Chair.
What do you think?
Ms. Mayor, I have a comment on that topic.
Yeah, go ahead. What do you think?
I don't think that you make a good point that people can look at the replay and kind of prepare for certain questions, but experience is going to be their experience and their expertise is going to be their expertise. And I don't think that will change between this meeting and any future meeting. So I think at least for myself, experience and expertise are the biggest things I'm grading them on. And,
well, you know what?
I don't think it's going to change.
Councilmember Patterson, at the same time, they could have their computer on and watching what everybody else is saying. So they're already watching what's been said, right? So yeah, they are watching. So, I mean, I'm sorry. Let's make that clarification. Yeah, I mean, I just thought about it. So can we do one more? Mayor Pro Tem, can we do one more at least?
Well, we can do it until 5 o'clock, but I have to leave. I did tell you that. I have a class tonight. I can't wait.
Okay, so we're gonna do the next two at a later time, but we'll try to knock out a third one. And you could take a look at the video for the YouTube, and we're still gonna continue with the other ones at a later date. So,
but Mayor, real quick,
yeah,
I think ultimately we have to fulfill this day that we set aside for all of them.
No, but why?
Because we put it on the agenda and everybody made this day available to do the interview. So I'm afraid if we say we're going to change that we already are going to get, pushback on how we're doing the process.
The reality is, Councilmember Valentine, Councilmember English, is two of these people requested to go first.
I get it.
So we're making a lot of little things.
But Mr. Mayor, but let me tell you, because already I heard from some people that we are not following our process from the beginning, the way you set up, they're going to do. So we're already breaking the rules So if we tell these people they were going to be interviewed today, and now we're going to tell two of these program, this kind of program is going to be a roller coaster.
Could I make a suggestion that you continue with the interviews, and if it's okay with Councilwoman Valentine, since it would be recorded, that you complete the interviews today with all the candidates, and then because it's recorded, the council or Mayor Pro Tem, I'm sorry, could review those last two interviews. She wouldn't be able to have a question, but she could review it, and that you then schedule another meeting where you come together with your discussions for grading.
Yeah, but then that wouldn't be fair to me because I wouldn't be able to get the questions in that I have, and I do have some specific questions for the other candidates.
Yes, that would be the fault of it.
Can we come back so that she could ask those questions, finish out today, and then bring them back so that she could finish them out through questioning?
I'm open to doing it on a second day.
I think we should hear them, and then because we're not going to score them today, right? So we're taking notes, and then we have to come back to another meeting. Maybe those two other people that Ms. Valentine's going to miss, we can have them available on that day, just to answer Ms. Valentine's question, and then it could be a quick one.
Councilmember Patterson, what do you think about what's said? Because I'm kind of more, I'll be frank, I'm kind of more leaning towards, a second meeting.
You have to listen.
I don't think there's anything legalistic telling us we can't.
I'm leaning towards the second meeting.
Mayor Pro Tem, would you rather have them complete the last two?
Well, I would rather have a second meeting myself.
Mr. City Attorney and Greg, do you see any problems with that?
If we are to adjourn and continue to a second meeting, if it's set for within 5 calendar days and we adjourn to a specific date and time and it's within 5 calendar days and we post it within 24 hours, we don't have to set another agenda for it. So, but it has to be within 5 calendar days. So it would have to be, since we're falling on a weekend, it would have to be done by.
Let's do it tomorrow.
Friday, yes. No, it's not. There's no time to put to.
I think we need to also check with the candidate, the two who would be left.
Yes.
When they're available. I do know that, they all have clients and they cleared the schedule for this, so. Okay,
so by when does it have to be done?
So if we want to go beyond the 5 calendar days, then we have to just re-agendize the meeting. But if we don't want to re-agendize the meeting, then it has to be within 5 calendar days, has to be adjourned to a date and time specific. So that would have to be done within this week.
So by what? By Friday?
By Friday.
What is the liking of the rest of my council colleagues who are wanting to do it?
I'm available anytime.
Let me just check for myself.
For clarification, Robert, it could bleed into next week if we agendalize the meeting, correct?
Yes, if we set another agenda for it, then we could set it for another date beyond 5 days.
For Monday?
Yeah, because Monday, it has to be less than 5 days, and Monday.
You have a meeting on Monday for the mall.
Oh, Monday is dead for me, man. I got everything. I'm loaded up on meetings. Like I'm literally loaded up on meetings that day.
And we have the budget meeting on the 18th.
Oh my good Lord, yes.
It's Tuesday.
4 o'clock.
Hey, we can stick out this meeting and just let Pro Tem look at it. And then vote at another meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know if the Mayor Pro Tem has
I was feeling it.
writing that she could offer to the city manager to ask.
Or Ms. Valentine can give us the questions.
Well,
I think she would want to.
She'd like to pose them.
Prefer herself to give.
Mayor Pro Tem Valentine, we'd like to make an accommodation, but.
So Ms. Valentine, do you have those questions in writing or you just have verbally?
Yeah, I didn't write them out because I wasn't expecting this to happen. So I didn't write them out.
It was something that you could contemplate to do before you leave, to give us those questions in writing, so we can ask them, and then you can listen to the recording.
Yes,
later on.
I was
Actually, I could do that.
Yeah,
If
I
we-
think that's the
But I
best
don't.
thing.
But I don't know who would I give them to.
City manager.
Yeah, I can give them to city manager or to one of us. We can ask your questions.
That's fine. I'll write them out.
Mr. Kim, am I allowed to ask questions in this forum, or would it have to
Well-
be the elected official or the clerk?
I think that would be.
Just give it to to the mayor. Give it to the mayor.
Give it to the mayor.
Yeah, you will be in charge, the mayor.
Why? I didn't agree to that.
Oh, if you're not, I can ask those questions. I don't have no shame.
No, it's not that. Okay, I'll just ask if, okay, she's right next door. I'll take them and I'll just make sure to answer them, ask those questions.
Okay, so.
Okay, why don't I bring in the next?
Yeah,
candidate?
let's just keep going because, you know.
Okay, so Eric, if you can bring in EJMA, Planning and Development, Inc.
Okay, I'm bringing in EJMA and Greg, please check your email. We have some of the people that have questions for you.
And we'll have a councilwoman, Mayor Pro Tem Valentine ask the first questions,
Yes,
questions
yes.
towards the beginning. So all you have to do, Mayor Pro Tem, is ask write down questions for the last two groups, okay?
I'm sorry. Say that again.
We have one group that's coming in. You got 15 minutes. You could ask some of the questions directly right now to this next group.
Okay, but you want me to write out the questions I'm going to ask?
For
and
the
then
second.
also be first in asking these people the questions? I can't do both.
Can't do both.
All right, well, I guess they're that long. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so why let someone else go first, and I'll write out my questions.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Spend a little time.
Okay, so are all the representatives from EJMA in the room now? Oh, here we come.
Thank you, council members. I mean, we're trying to make accommodations and working it out.
Okay, it looks like we have Ms. McGee, and she is the main representative for EJMA Planning and Development. Ms. McGee, if you could please introduce yourself, a little bit about your company, and then the council will then proceed with interview questions.
Sure. I'm Ebony J. McGee Anderson, and I also have Tony Forge with me. We are EJMA Planning and Development, and we do a lot of planning and development work. We have some city clients and also private clients, but we do design and build out and also planning policy, economic development, and general planning permitting. Then I'll let Tony, hopefully she got in.
I'm in.
Okay, great. Tony, would you like to talk about our social equity work?
Yes, my name is Tony Forge. I'm a lawyer here in Los Angeles, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us. I have been very involved with social equity since I entered the cannabis industry in 2016. I'm a 27-year attorney and decided that I wanted to be really involved in cannabis with an emphasis on social equity. And so at the beginning, I worked with the city of Los Angeles doing the first white paper that was the blueprint for social equity. And currently I work with the Long Beach Collective Association with their social equity subgroup. What I do is help the city council have guidelines and recommendations for operators, programs, as well as the community college program that they're having in cannabis in Long Beach. Ebony and I also work for Our Dream. And Our Dream is a national social equity panel where we're looking at the best practices, recommendations, and guidelines for social equity programs in municipalities nationwide. So we're hoping that would be a blueprint for the best practices for social equity. I am also a technical advisor for the City of LA and their social equity program that is just starting. I'm developing work study and workforce programs for people who are already operators, as well as those who are trying to enter the cannabis industry. So that's kind of what I do. I have a huddle in Oakland with operators called the Green Huddle, where it just help people in their daily operations with being successful, and just lend my talents to really whoever needs it in the quest for social equity.
Okay, so are you ready to take questions, ma'am?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. We'll take.
Is that where we're at? Okay, no, thank you so much. Councilmember Montero, go ahead first, and then maybe Mayor Pro Tem right after that if she's ready.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome, ladies, Tony and Ebony. Can you expand a little bit the work that you have done with some other cities and give like examples of the concrete work that you implement in those cities for us, please?
Sure. We have worked with a few cities now, the city of Cudahy, the city of Commerce. We're also doing some technical assistance for the city of Los Angeles. I've also worked with the city of Linwood, working on the development and implementation of the commercial cannabis program from a land use perspective. So mostly what we do is go into a city, implement the cannabis program, whether it's an economic development initiative or if they are doing it as some type of development permit. We will build out the entire program based on the ordinance. We help write and create the ordinance. We help develop the application process. And then we also do processing of any permits or licenses that are a part of that process, and then also do ongoing compliance. So pre-development inspections. So we're looking at basically like a building inspection, making sure each property is zoned properly, has the proper setbacks, has any development standards, landscaping. We've built out landscaping programs, and then in facade improvement programs for cannabis specifically. And then we also take into consideration any other design elements the city would like to incorporate into their program, and we'll implement and also do inspections on those to make sure that the operators are operating in compliance with both state law, the city regulations, and then any development standards the city has set forth. In a lot of the cities, this is an economic development push, so then we're monitoring those aspects as well, including building out the community development program and any other programs that the city may see fit to generate revenues.
Can you talk about a little bit about how do you work with the staff, right? Because we want to make sure that our staff is going to be trained to take the leadership down the road on this cannabis program, and also touch base on your
the cost recovery program.
Okay.
So one of the interesting things, and I think that kind of sets us apart from other firms, we are a smaller boutique firm. So our clients, we take on a few clients at a time. We usually only have like 1 or 2 cities in a year because of the involvement it takes to really do a program properly. And one of the things that we try to do is train the staff on the program. So we come in and put on operator workshops, we put on staff trainings, we put on a lot of outreach programs for the community to ask questions and understand cannabis and learn about not only the program, but about the plant itself and how these operators are going to be operating in a regulated market. And then we also train the staff how to keep the program going. So we really like to come in and work hand in hand with the city staff. We are not a firm that has, 50 or 100 members and, things just get passed around. We are actually there at the city working in tandem with the city staff. That's one of the things that we really like to do, because our goal is to train your department to facilitate this program ongoing, on an ongoing basis. So we've worked with code enforcement officers, and we go out and train them what to look for. A lot of times you have staff members that have never even seen a commercial cannabis operation. So we try to train them on what to look for in a practical way. Another thing that we do is we have worked with other operators on the private side for compliance. And so we understand how the operations work, and we really try to bridge that gap between the city staff and the operators, creating that relationship between the two. And that really helps the operators be compliant, because they know that they have a relationship with the city. And that's really what we try to facilitate, is bringing all three pieces, the community, the city, and our operators together to create this program.
And just to follow up a little bit with what Ebony's saying, a big part of that is really utilizing ancillary people with the city. So we worked, for example, for the City of Commerce, we did a lot of community engagement and education. We went to approximately 7 parks around the city and really did an entire presentation for the community involving cannabis. So we worked with Parks and Recreation. We worked with Building and Safety. We worked with the police. And so it's those ancillary groups that are on the fringe of the whole cannabis project, but really have a place in it. And we have worked effectively with all members of cities as well.
So now mention about the recovery fees model, please.
Yes. So the cost recovery model, that, you know, it's not a unique concept, but it was fairly unique for cannabis. And a lot of other programs throughout the state have this cost recovery model. So what we do is cities generally have something in their municipal code about cost recovery and what their goal is from a budgetary standpoint on cost recovery for permitting. So we start there. And if you have an 80% cost recovery, then we model the program after that. If you want a full cost recovery program, 100% recovery, what we do is we model, we create phases in the program so that operators can go through a phased approach. So you're not asking operators to pay $50,000 and then they may or may not get a license. You go through a phased approach where you're pricing out each phase of the process based on the services provided in that process and distributing it amongst the proposed, or at least the anticipated number of applicants. And that way the city recoups all of their funds and nothing, it's at no charge to the city. So it's a full cost recovery model. And that's generally how our program works, including when we're doing any post-approval services. So any inspections or ongoing monitoring and compliance, all of those things get charged back to the operators. So it's a little bit of work to exercise that and get that program working at the city level. And we work with your finance department to get that implemented. But essentially they get billed for all the services, including city staff. So everything will be back to the operators. That also, in my experience, has afforded itself to encourage operators to stay in compliance, because when they're paying for their non-compliance, it really starts to encourage them to be more and more compliant. So we've seen that really be beneficial on both ends. That also includes any outreach. We have found that it's really important to work with the operators pretty closely to help them get through all the different processes of the city. You're working with some folks that have absolutely no experience with permits and licensing. And then you have some who are corporations who have, a world of experience. So being able to lend that support also helps with that, ability for them to get compliant and stay compliant. And it allows the smaller operators some really technical high-level services at not our, the full rate. So it evens the playing field, I think, for a lot of operators to do the full cost recovery program, because it gives them access to technical experts that they may not have otherwise.
All right, thank you, appreciate it. That's it, Mr. Mayor, for me.
Thank you. We'll move on to Mayor Pro Tem Valentine.
Thank you.
Give you an opportunity to do this.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. McGee.
Hi.
Good afternoon, Ms. Ford. Thank you for coming.
Hi. Thank you so much. Pleasure.
So I liked your answers to your questions to Councilmember Montero about the training aspect. I want to drill down a little bit on that. When you talk about training, do you also train in enforcement?
Yes. So that is one of the target areas, actually. So we usually do some type of pre-operator, or applicant workshop where applicants learn about what the city expectations are. So before they even apply, we like to tell operators, hey, this is what you're signing up for, because every city does have some nuances. Most cities are going to follow state regulations, but every city is unique and they might have additional regulations. So we'd like to train those operators. And then after they've been selected and we have our pool of operators, so they've gone from applicants to operators, we like to do ongoing trainings. So we're training them, and I'll let Tony touch a little bit on this, but we do state compliance. So every time there's an update in legislation, I believe there's one coming in July. It's a moving, living, breathing document, these legislations. And so we train on them as new things come up. We train on METRIC, the track and trace system. We train on CDTFA. So all of their tax regulations, we're training on that. And we teach the operators how to comply with those regulations. So it is for about the first year or 18 months or so, it is an ongoing program, which is really important if you're planning to do something with social equity, because a lot of those operators or applicants don't necessarily have that experience. Some of the more sophisticated, I will say, operators may have done this for the last 4 years, so they may not benefit as much from the trainings, but some of the operators, this may be their first opportunity, and we provide those trainings. So local and state trainings, we cover them all, actually.
And what is the size of your organization?
We have about, pre-COVID, we had about 10 to 12 staffers full-time. Now we're down to about 4. So we have 4 full-time, and then we have 2 part-time, and then Tony and myself.
And what do they do?
Well, we have mostly project management. So we have, Nick does project management and handles a lot of the compliance and inspections. We have our engineering side that handles plan check and also reviewing plans and helping with build out. We have our design team that creates designs, obviously not for city projects, but for our private clients on the design side. And then we also have administrative services and social equity, that's Tony. And mostly everybody else pretty much does some type of project management for licensing and or compliance. And then Tony,
what is your procedure for educating the community about the cannabis program?
Well, it really does vary from city to city, but generally what we like to propose is doing a citywide workshop. And we typically break them up into 2. We have one for seniors. If you have a high senior population, a lot of cities do. And we like to talk to them about, just all of the things that are happening in the regulatory framework. And we also have our general sessions, which will be for all of the community. And goes through the entire regulatory framework. We talk about the importance of licensing. We have a lot of opposition in our communities because we've been conditioned to have certain stereotypes around cannabis. So we talk about those. We like to engage with your code enforcement and or law enforcement if that's something that the city is interested in incorporating. We talk about fire safety. We talk about the violence and theft around non-permitted or non-licensed facilities and other crimes related. And then we talk about licensed facilities and how we're seeing a decrease in crime and the safety features and mechanisms that the fire departments are requiring for cannabis, and we're educating the community about those. So a lot of regulatory work, but also a lot of safety. So we talk a lot about that. And then we usually take a lot of questions, to be honest, just about cannabis in and of itself. How do you grow it? How do you mitigate the smells? What agencies are overseeing this? How are they overseeing it? What chemicals are being used? Are they getting flushed into our waterways? All of those different things. CEQA, what is CEQA? How are we addressing it? We get a ton of questions from the community about cannabis. So it really depends on where we are in the phase of the process, but generally those are the types of workshops we like to see and do.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Real quick, Real quick question on my behalf. What cities have you worked with? I heard you mentioned Linwood, Cudahy, a lot. Do you have any? What other cities?
City of Commerce. And then right now, we're doing some technical assistance work for the city of Los Angeles.
So some of the southeast cities.
The southeast cities, yes.
Have you worked with? I'm just curious. Not that it's a requirement, but have you worked with Bell Gardens, and Huntington Park, or anybody else that were there?
No, I didn't. I haven't.
Okay, but those three are substantial in the southeast. Okay.
Right.
Thank you, ladies.
We've done some advisory services and some, non-paid work for other city elected officials in other cities and other areas, but our clients would include those.
But ultimately, it's you two ladies that are the core of the group, and you have other resources that you could count on for the other aspects, correct?
Well, everyone that works at the firm, yes. And then we do have some other ancillary services that for our private clients, but I'm not sure that we usually don't use those for the cities. For example, architects or design, we usually don't do that for the city.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilmember Patterson?
Yes, sir. Miss McGee, is it?
McGee Anderson, yes. It's a long one, I know. Either is fine.
I was looking at your proposal that you have a bit of a planning background. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a master's in urban and regional planning. I've been a planner for a lot of years now. Over 15 years. I've worked in the private sector and the public sector prior to returning back to the LA region. I was in the county of Ventura running the natural resource program, doing oil and gas and surface mining. Two of the heavy hitters in the planning and permitting and licensing world. So I've done a lot of that, but I've also done some economic initiatives, economic development initiatives, and worked in, actually did a small stint in the city of Compton doing some planning work as a consultant. So I've been the county of Riverside. I've been pretty much throughout California doing a lot of planning work.
Thank you. Councilmember Reyes English.
Thank you. Hello, ladies.
Hi.
A couple of questions. You mentioned City of Commerce and City of Cudahy. What's the population for Commerce?
I don't know the exact population numbers for Commerce, but it's I do know that the demographics are they have a smaller population and mostly industrial areas. So. Right. And they have high senior population.
Right. So very, very limited on population, mainly industrial. What did your outreach program look like there? I would assume it's for cannabis, right?
Yes, it was for cannabis. And I will say, while Commerce has a very small population, they are very active. Their residents are very, very active. They showed up to every single hearing. A number of them showed up to every workshop. And what we did was we went, like Tony mentioned before, they wanted to do it at every park location or recreational center. So we did a full outreach program through that. We also reach out to some of the churches or any other organization the city offered the program, we would come to them. So we did a lot of outreach. Like I said, we did the senior center. And so we had probably 100 or so residents show up for that. And we target those same target areas in our outreach: education, safety, public safety, the types of uses, education around the varying license types of the state, and then some of the city specific things.
And we did that also, council member, in English as well as Spanish. And we also had a job fair. So once a lot of our operators became operational, we and the city sponsored a job fair. And so we were offering positions to members of the community as well.
How many licenses went out in Commerce?
There were about 20 licensees. However, there was a referendum. So not all of those licensees went forward with the process. And so I think there's about 12 or 14 that made it through the first round.
That's how many are there now?
That's how many that are there now, yes.
Operating.
theoretically operating, because one of the things that I think is really important to note is that, like I've said before, some of these, you have varying education levels in cannabis. So you're going to have operators that are going to hit the ground running, and then you're going to have operators who get a dilapidated building and need to do a full build out that could take a year or two. And then you might have some that struggle because they're not as familiar with the development process. So they are authorized to operate. Not all of them are currently operating.
The city of Cudahy, do you know the population?
Yes, it's pretty dense. I think it's like close, it's a pretty dense, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's like close to 1 million people. It's a lot of people in Cudahy in 1 square mile. One of the,
okay, real quick. And how many licenses do they have?
They have about, well, okay, let me just break this down a little bit technically, because there's only about 10 or so sites, but they have multiple licenses there. So some operators might hold 3 or 4 different license types, but there's only 12 locations. So that one is a little tricky because there's only a certain number of designated spots. And I believe that there were 12 of those, but they might have up to 3 or 4 different license types.
Which license would you say are most beneficial and least impactful?
That is an excellent question. And I think distribution is the least impactful when you're talking about to the community. You know, there's no growing, there is no retail. So those licenses don't have a lot of impact on the cities. But I think the ones that are most beneficial to a city are probably cultivation and retail, because those two generate the highest profit margins, which in turn turns into more, money for the cities.
If we were to authorize an issue a cultivation license, what tax per square foot is competitive in the state for indoor cultivation?
Well, I think you already have a tax initiative for some type of commercial cannabis program. So if you wanted to do a fee instead of a tax on that, if you wanted to add an additional fee, I'm not sure if I would recommend even a price per square foot. I think there are other models that might be better. And especially if you're allowing a tiered license or integrated license, there may be some models based on gross receipts that might be more effective than a price per square foot.
Yeah, the reason I say this is because obviously I would like to see the cultivator and the city to be successful and benefit from that, right? So I think that's important with regards to coming up with an idea for that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that I just don't think I would recommend price per square foot, because you could have operators with a smaller operation or a larger operation. And what you would really want to do is get a percentage of those gross receipts the same as you would do any other operator.
Yeah. Does the applicant have experience running a business? Do you think that's important?
Yes and no. So I think that I think we have to change the way we think about running a business, because when we say, does an operator have to run a business? And then we ask them for very specific business requirements. We then close the door for some of those social equity applicants that may be operating in the traditional market and may not be what we traditionally see as a business, but they very well are running a business. So I think we need to be very mindful of the way we frame the questions on these applications, not to continually disenfranchise an entire group of individuals that what we call our social equity applicants.
And then how can I word this? What makes you the best suited for Hawthorne? And is there going to be a local hire component?
Well, I'll start with why I think we're the best for Hawthorne. And I think it's important for smaller cities to work with smaller firms because they can get the attention that they need. When you have a bigger firm, obviously you're one of. And with us, we're really focused and hyper and even laser focused on what's best for the city. I also think it's really important for social equity programs to be designed and implemented by those who have also been negatively impacted by the war on drugs. Who better to create a program for us than members of our own community? So I think that's really important. The other thing that I think that really helps us, we have a very well-rounded staff of a lot of different disciplines. So we do have that engineering background. We do have design background. So we get a lot of operators who might not necessarily have access to a higher end or very expensive architect or even legal services or insurance or banking. But we have those relationships where we can point them in the right direction and give them the answers to a lot of the questions that they may need. So I think that's one of the reasons why I think that we would be best for Hawthorne.
Considering the city, our city being 6.5 mile radius city, population roughly 87,000 people, what would be the suggestion for number of retail? How many does that license look like for the city of Hawthorne? And would you agree that there should be a minimum amount in the applicants on community benefit that they would be ultimately paying to benefit community in a yearly income?
So two things. One, I do not like the model of X amount of people, X amount of licenses. I don't like that model because it isn't always representative of what the needs of the city are. So what I like to do is take a more comprehensive look, especially look at your zoning. A lot of consultants don't even take into consideration land use. So you could say you have X amount of people and X amount of licenses, but you really need to be looking at the zoning and the opportunity for real estate in your area. You have to really take a look at that and what uses you want to allow based on that. So that's one of the analysis that I like to do, is take a more comprehensive, and maybe that's the planner in me, but I like to look at it from a comprehensive standpoint, and also look at what sensitive uses that you have that might prohibit some of these sites. For instance, schools, parks, recreational centers. Maybe you don't want them next to churches. Maybe your church community is very big in your city and they would prefer not having the traffic of a delivery service. So some of those things may not be sketched into state law, but they're things that are important to your community. So I don't think that there is a formula for this. X amount of people, X amount of licenses. The other thing for community benefits, I absolutely think that every cannabis operator should contribute to a community benefit fund. And I absolutely think that it should be a flat rate amount and paid annually to the city to offset the impacts of having a brand new industry in your city.
What should be the cost of each applicant?
The cost of each application?
Application fee.
The way that we put it in our cost recovery model is, again, based on the amount of services and what you want to do prior to. So I think, again, we phased it out. So each phase of the application is a different fee. And I think that initial application fee is going to be roughly between $10,000 and $12,000 generally, possibly less depending on how much early outreach you want to recover. So some cities say, we want to do a ton of preliminary outreach and we'll bear the cost of that because it's important for us. Then those costs don't get passed on to your application. But if you want to recoup the full cost recovery, then those do get passed on your applicants, and that's going to increase or decrease the price of their application. But roughly you see between $10,000 and $13,000 is your general first phase application fees.
How should the zoning work so that certain developers don't monopolize, right?
Mm-hmm.
And artificially inflate the
yes. Oh, that's such a loaded question, but yeah. It's like my passion topic.
Controlling those industrial zones, and then on top of that, you know about LA making folks go and rent out spaces and pay for something that ultimately does not deliver on licensing. So what's your thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts on that. I'm not even sure we have enough time today to cover them. But I think that as legislators and land use professionals, we really have to be more mindful of equity and how that plays out in our land use process. And we have a lot of policies that prevent certain groups from having access. And real estate is one of those bigger ones. Zoning, we have seen it from the beginning of time, how zoning can really impact our communities. So forcing individuals to have a building, there are some benefits to that from a processing perspective or a logistic perspective, but it also really hinders our social equity programs. When you force individuals who are already limited with resources to get a building that is owned by, could be a big corporation, it could be even mom and pops, but it's not usually owned by them. So they're leasing it. They're paying leases while they're going through this process. And by the time they get out, they can barely operate. So I don't recommend that model in and of itself. I think, again, we have to take this comprehensive approach to how we're planning to phase out this application process and who all we're trying to target and benefit from the program. And those are the things that we would definitely need to look at and research from the city what their desire and what their needs are in the community. So I think that's more where I see that the access to real estate being an issue and a hindrance for some groups in the community.
And I also think it opens the door for predatory practices. I mean, that's what we've really seen in the city of LA. Because property was a requirement, people took deals that they really shouldn't have gotten into and were taken advantage of because they really needed that investment in order, like Ebony's saying, to keep that property going. So not the best model.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's, we have bad actors. We have folks in Los Angeles that are working under the radar. But I like the fact that the city of Los Angeles took initiative and shuts off their power and their electricity with DWP. And they're sitting there unable to do anything, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good move on, on part of the council for that.
Absolutely.
There's 15 council offices, 250,000 people in each council district. And as you can imagine, the businesses on top of that, there's lots of violations going on. But let me tell you, it's good that that came into play because it eliminated all those bad actors, and it's still working. Yeah,
absolutely. I think LA did a great job with putting the burden of responsibility back on the landowner.
Yeah,
that really forced them to be accountable and responsible for the tenants that they let in. Northern California, some of the Northern California counties also did some of the same things, but with water nutrients and things like that that aren't great for cannabis, but they're great for other plants and they're perfectly safe. And so if you do not have a license, you will suffer the consequences of those things. But I think for when we're talking about licensed businesses and those predatory practices, we don't want to get in the habit of creating these relationships between big corporations and small social equity applicants that they're getting put into these really predatory contracts and forced into these relationships because they have no other access to finances. So that's what we're really mindful of.
Okay.
No, and I do know, Mayor, and I'm going to wrap up here in a minute.
Okay.
I do know that by implementing, ordinances and a good cannabis program, it eliminated a lot of, if you will, harassment from police agencies, the sheriff's department, government agencies, etc., because it was provided legally now with barriers and grounds to follow. Absolutely. And it eliminated that. So ultimately, I'd like to see that too here in the city of Hawthorne. But diversity, equity, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Equity and diversity is very important.
Absolutely.
But lastly, I want to say, has your organization have any issues that you would like to address to the council? Anything that, litigation or anything for that matter that you have faced in your years of cannabis or anything under your purview of organization?
Not directly. I mean, all cannabis licensing programs, and I say this to any city who asks about doing cannabis, you're going to have a lot of scrutiny. You're going to have eyes everywhere. That's why I really think it's important to do what you all are doing and having a very transparent process, because it builds that integrity and maintains the integrity throughout the process. And that's really important for us. We haven't had any legal challenges, any lawsuits, anything like that. But lots of cities do. Cannabis is an industry that, will challenge a lot of moves that a city makes. So it's really important that you have a strong team that's paying attention to the details, writing ordinances that are very airtight, and really paying attention to all of those I's and T's and making sure that they're crossed, because we've seen some of the programs get defaulted or restarted, like the city of Oxnard. They had to restart their program because there were some processing issues. We have seen many cities, that's not the only one, but that's one of the more recent ones. So we want to make sure that the process doesn't have to restart and that any challenges go through the normal administrative process, but none personally or none with our firm.
With your firm.
Okay. All right, folks. Thank you. Anybody else? We're good?
Thank you.
Thank you,
so
ladies.
much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor, can we get 3 minutes to the bathroom, please?
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Everybody good with that? Okay, so
I guess we can bring the next candidates in so that they'll be ready.
just he's some people just need to go to restroom break, but like you say, we wouldn't even like shut down the meeting. Let's just what's a couple minutes, especially after it's been like 2.5 hours that we keep this thing alive.
Hey, Eric, do you want to just let the next group that was that cannabis public policy know that they're going to be on deck pretty soon, a few minutes?
Oh, which group is that? Is that the CSI?
No, the cannabis public policy.
Oh, got it. Okay, Cannabis Public Agency coming up.
Hey, Greg, for my notes, who was the second presenter? What group was that?
That was HDL.
Thank you.
And then Eric, if you can let them know to, oh, they're in, okay. They're just, council's taking a restroom break right now, so.
Yeah, we're not going to shut down the meeting. We'll just keep the meeting open. Councilmember Reyes English is at her desk. So now it's going to be my turn to use the.
Sounds great.
So when I introduce you guys, you'll just introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your organization, and then the council will proceed with questions.
Okay, great.
Come in.
Are you ready? Okay, Greg, let's go. Let's go. Next one, please. Thank you.
Okay, so council, here we have next is Cannabis Public Policy Consulting. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your company, and then the council will proceed with questions.
Sure thing. Well, hi, everyone. Cannabis Public Policy Consultants, we did not prepare a presentation today. We find these engagements are pretty personal. And so we figure that if we only have 4 minutes to introduce ourselves, we'll go ahead and let you see our faces. I'll go ahead and I'll introduce our company. I'll introduce myself, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Alan. Cannabis Public Policy Consulting is a consulting firm that focuses on bringing a public health, public safety, and equity framework to the establishment of regulatory frameworks across the country. We are entirely technocratic. We are not lobbyists, nor are we advocates for legalization. We're just a bunch of policy nerds. We work along the regulatory continuum, so anywhere from analysis, market and demand studies, to the actual regulatory writing and the stand-up of the market. These areas include things like a program rollout, compliance, any sort of technical assistance in those areas. And CPPC represents a partnership between Advocates for Human Potential, which is a 35-year-old behavioral health and human services firm that has been working with the government, whether it be federal, state, or local, on regulations for a variety of drugs, including those of opioids, as well as working with Andrew Friedman, who launched Colorado's and our nation's first adult use system. The partnership started in 2019, and together we have worked with over 18 governments since 2019 on the topic of cannabis. And my name is Mackenzie Slade. I am the Deputy Director of CPPC. I have a Master's of Public Health from UCLA. I am local. I live in Los Angeles. And I've been directing each project across the regulatory continuum since 2019. And I am joined today by my colleague, Alan Marzilli. So Alan, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Yep. Hi, everybody, and thank you for wanting to talk to us. My name's Alan. I have been with Advocates for Human Potential since around 2001 as a consultant and an employee, working on a variety of public health and public policy issues, doing a lot of substance use prevention, mental health, homelessness, housing, employment development. And my role in the cannabis thing has been working directly with states on developing their regulatory framework so that they can have public health while at the same time balancing their revenue goals and all of that, but preserving the integrity of the system and protecting public health for everybody. So I look forward to speaking with you about what's going on in your city and how we can help you.
Okay, so are you guys ready for questions? Ms. Slade, and I'm gonna start off with, we wanna make sure that Mayor Pro Tem's questions get asked. So I wanna make sure that we ask them in the front end so that, like, you know, she knows that we asked her questions and they don't get embedded in other people's questions, right? So, so the first question is, it's important that staff be trained, right? Our staff, our city staff, so that they can take over all aspects of the cannabis operation, including the enforcement. That's how we've intended this the results of all this to be. What will you do to facilitate that type of training?
That's an excellent question. We have experience doing this across the ranges of government, that state and local. The most important aspect of training is uniformity in training. For the city of Detroit, for example, we have trained their staff in the application licensing process as well as compliance planning. And I've actually personally trained 3 program managers for cannabis offices. For us, in training for compliance and making sure that we are giving you the appropriate tools and instruments that you need to be passed off to your staff, creating standard operating procedures is the first and foremost measure that I would be using. I would be the task lead for this aspect, as well as making sure that in the development of these SOPs and workflows, we are including and empowering your staff to partake in the engagement. As a firm that's been doing technical assistance for 35 years, we've noticed that the best practice in training is active engagement. So I'd say we'd probably start with those 2 pieces.
Okay. I have another question. The second question that for each of the groups that follow, right? Community engagement. Everybody's been talking about that. Community engagement and the outreach part is critical to involve the community and to educate them about cannabis in general, right? What experience does your group have in this, and how would you accomplish this in our city?
It's a great question. Again, you guys don't start with the easy ones. So we've done community and stakeholder outreach for every contract. It's actually a best practice in writing these ordinances that not day 1, but day 2 is stakeholder engagement. Reason being is that there's a reciprocity in stakeholder engagement and education, which is that we don't know what we don't know, and they don't know what they don't know. For a city like Hawthorne, that's quite small, but very diverse, we would have to put together a very strategic outreach plan. And I think in our proposal, we actually said that within 7 days of contract execution, we would have a strategic outreach plan, especially if you're considering to include an equity ordinance. Reason being is that there's different types of stakeholder outreach. 1, which is just public forum education. 2, which is that reciprocity piece that I was speaking about for people who are maybe more engaged in the public health and public safety side of things, where they will need to be educated on what it is what are the rules, what does it mean, how does it relate to the overall state? And then the third aspect, which is the potential applicant outreach. These are all critical stakeholder groups that we've worked with both in San Joaquin, Stockton, the state of Maine, we organized for them, as well as Rhode Island.
Thank you. And then I have my final my question on my behalf, and the word social equity programs. Do you have a social equity program? And everybody seems to have a social equity program in mind, but frankly, I have not seen anything I've researched and anything I've seen out there any successful program that's actually taken place. So everybody has that. So everybody wants to resonate with us. So can you give us your pragmatic perspective on that, on the reality of everybody asking for that, please?
Oh, sure. And I'll ask Alan to engage in this one as well. I'm sorry I haven't called upon you just yet, but I want to say that that's sort of been our sweet spot, is that we've worked with states on the concept of social equity, and that it has been a colossal failure, to be frank, across state and local governments. We actually, for the city of Detroit, were engaged for our specialty in this area because, in summary, we have practical and technical skills in how to create an appropriate licensing structure for social equity that we've seen successful, and we come with the firsthand best practices of social equity, which include the following, which is a priority licensing structure where they are first to market, including a set aside of a certain amount of licenses, and as well as ensuring that in the stakeholder engagement process, we're including the social equity voices, which may include things like program, technical assistance, and funding. Alan, I'll let you join in here about our work in Detroit specifically if you have thoughts as well.
Right. I mean, and you're right. It has been a challenge, and very few people have done it well. And there's a couple of barriers that make it so difficult. One is access to capital due to the current state of banking laws. The other is that you can't really, everybody wants to say, well, we want this to benefit locals. And it's very difficult to structure it due to the legal environment, where if you are excluding outside companies from coming in, these well-funded players on the outside are very quick to file lawsuits. And so what we've been working with on Detroit is coming up with a model that's a lot like what they've done in Oakland, where you give a fair shake to the outsiders who are going to want to get in, and you don't say this is entirely for locals, but at the same time you are coming up with innovative solutions where you say, okay, we're going to focus on licensing some of these smaller scale applicants, which you can do with California's tiered system, having sort of these boutique players that some of them operate within sort of a business incubator environment. And so there are ways, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it'll be easy, but there are ways if you're committed to doing that and committed to helping out the people who live in Hawthorne and who are committed to the community succeed in some of these smaller scale projects. There are ways of structuring that. And I think,
yeah, no, I really appreciate your response. And that social equity question has been asked by my colleagues to the previous three presenters. Mm-hmm. So I just thought I'd ask it up on the front end because I was kind of interested in seeing what you guys would say about that.
Yeah.
But it's been addressed. Who's next from our city council colleagues? Do I have a?
Sorry, if I could just add one more thing.
Yes, go ahead. Yes,
that our subcontractor on this, Johan, has worked with social equity applicants and is providing is able to provide some of that sort of hands-on expertise and sort of sees where they're coming from. And there's a little hand-holding involved.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Montero.
Actually, can you guys elaborate a little bit more about the Oakland model, right? Because it's been talking a lot about the success of Oakland on the equity social program. So can you elaborate more on that for me, please?
Sure. So Oakland has been both innovative and probably the only city that hasn't experienced a lawsuit on their social equity program. And Alan, do you recall off the top of your head the tiers that they had? I think they had like a subset of licenses that were priority structured given the state's definition of social equity. And what they did was, I think it was like maybe 30 licenses they were able to release at a time. And they went through an application cycle that was that every year upon review, they would release more licenses specifically for this social equity structure.
Right.
There's two reasons why. Oh, go ahead.
Right. And that's one of the ways that they were able to avoid the lawsuits, was they structured it so that each time it was there were going to be licenses available for people who are not social equity applicants, who are not city residents. And so there wasn't the big push to try to stop the issuing of licenses through an injunction. So
right. The problem with social equities programs across the nation so far have been twofold. It's been a legal challenge from those who are trying to enter the market and find this to be a very reasonable area for a lawsuit, that it's very just ripe for litigation based on Commerce Clause. And then the second aspect of it is just that funding piece. So Oakland's been really innovative on the funding side by opening opportunities for incubator spaces, which is what Alan had just spoken to. For example, they have a commercial kitchen license where they found that they were having less applicants in the social equity space for manufacturing. And how they handled that was, and obviously in an effort to promote social equity in their own industry, was that if they allocated a commercial kitchen license to a sort of co-op opportunity, that people could rent the kitchen and extract and do all their manufacturing for a few hours at a time, it would alleviate a huge financial burden for those who are interested in entering but couldn't have funding to perhaps entertain a commercial kitchen. So that's been a really successful model. They've had that up for 2 years now, and it's been quite successful. So they have those little innovative pieces where they're willing to take risks on things like co-ops. A lot of cities wouldn't take that risk. And I think that in addition to that, I'll just be honest that it's Oakland, and that at some point you have to respect Oakland. I think that their city is very, very respected as one of the founders for cannabis, whether in the medical or adult use space.
Yeah, thank you. So can you extend a little bit, how did you help Stockton and San Joaquin Valley County? How did you guys work with them?
Sure. So we work with them in the capacity of writing their set of regulations. With Stockton, there was a social equity assessment and program. Our colleague who couldn't join us today, given the time commitment, was not able to join us, but he did lead that effort. That's Andrew Friedman. But yeah, this would be a very similar engagement to those, in that it was a full set of regulatory writing, as well as coaching, social equity assessment, and training.
So those are the only two cities in California that you guys are working currently?
That we have previously worked in. Well, that and Los Angeles County, those are the three. And we have those engagements had closed after the RFP closed in 2019, I believe.
Any other challenge that you have faced on some of these programs?
Sure. I mean, the social equity component is certainly a challenge.
No, I don't want to talk no more about social.
Okay, no more social. I will say
different areas.
Sure, that was a challenge. For San Joaquin, there was the need to create an internal working group, which included components of the fire and planning and all the departments that needed to be in line for things like inspection. I will say that from what I understand through Andrew is that was a challenging process, because it's a lot of stakeholders with varying timelines and processes that had to now come together to speak the same language, which is something that we do with states as well, is sort of bring everyone to the table. But this was a formalized working group. So anytime you sort of formalize anything, there's going to be a little bit of a.
And how did you structure your community outreach?
How was our structure for community outreach?
Yeah.
Is that the question? Our structure is pretty standard to what we put in our proposal, which is that there was an opportunity for public forums, an opportunity for public hearings, as well as strategic outreach based on community members of interest. So it was that open sort of concept for public, and then the targeted education piece.
Thank you.
Yeah, no
Okay.
problem.
Do I have any hands up from anybody else?
Yeah, my hands.
And Patterson, Councilmember Patterson, I think, is he here, or did he step out?
I'm here. I'm listening.
Okay, no, I just wanted to make sure that you were here. I could see you if you raise your hand. Okay, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Mayor. I had it, again, we've been doing this for a minute now, so forgive me. Which license would you say are beneficial and least impactful?
Are beneficial and least impactful? I would say that in demand, it would be in retail. I think it depends on how you're looking at it. From a public health perspective, I would say cultivators. From a product manufacturing perspective, I would say cultivators as well. Alan, any thoughts on those?
Right. Well, I mean, I think that just because of your location, our assumption was that you would have some interest in discussing whether you felt comfortable with the consumption lounges, given the fact that you're close to the airport. And it's just a question of what is the community's appetite for having something like that, because that raises a whole different set of issues. If you're operating with a gross receipts tax, the disadvantage to a cultivation facility coming in is that they would then owe a gross receipts tax on anything that they sold to a dispensary elsewhere. And so you might have less interest in cultivators coming in, but I think that the retail is going to be something that you should look at, and the consumption lounge. And again, that's going to be something that is going to be worked out at the community engagement stages, because it may be that the community doesn't, has a perception that having a bunch of people stopping in and, partaking on their way to the airport is not something that they want to have.
And you segue into community engagement, which is something I'm very strong on. How would you coordinate community engagement with regards to not only engaging the community, but in educating the community? How would you operate that? What does that look like?
Sure, yeah, this is a great question. And for one, we first like to come and feel out the city and understand who your population is and how, what avenues you'd like to personally, or the city would like to personally lean on. You'll be shocked by how many avenues that there are already established. But as far as education, we stand very firmly in the opportunity to offer all education materials in both English and Spanish, as well as at a 6th grade reading level. This is a best practice in community education. Alan and I both come from a public health side of the house, so we're big on community education. So that, and then additionally, understanding that certain groups and within the community might request more intensive education, and being flexible and willing to truly work with the community. We don't take this aspect lightly. It's certainly something as public health professionals we feel confidently in.
How diverse is your team?
That's an excellent question. We are a small team. For this project, it would be myself, Alan, Andrew Friedman, and Johan Balboa. She would be representing the only true diversity on our team, to be entirely frank.
No Black, no Latinos?
Well, Johanna is Latino, but she would be.
Yeah, she identifies as a sort of Afro-Latina, so, and she's a native Spanish speaker, so she.
Our community here in the city of Hawthorne is roughly, give or take, 87,000. City 6.5 mile radius city. Very diverse, Latino, Black, Asian, and Caucasian, obviously. But it's also somewhat divided. And I say that because of the history of the city. I don't know if you've made any research of the city. Back in the day, it was considered a sundown city. It was zoned in a way where they kept the minority and those that were less fortunate in one section of the community, and those that were a little bit more prosperous in another section. And so considering the dynamics and how we've come very far in a diverse council, a body made up of Black, Latino, and at one point we even had Lebanese. And so that is just the changes that are happening here in the city of Hawthorne. So a diverse program and moreover leadership is very important to me. I'm sure similar concerns for our colleagues as well. So in talking about education, talking about materials in English and Spanish, and talking about engagement, how would you engage the community, boots on the ground, running?
That's an excellent question. I wish our colleague Johan could be here to describe this to you. And I want to respect everything that you've just said and not even attempt to answer what she might put forward, just out of respect for the diversity and not wanting to misspeak on her behalf. I hope you.
That's fair enough. That's fine. With regards to how zoning works for certain developers, you know, to not monopolize and artificially inflate and control industrial zones, we assign in the city. How would you or some of your team members have expertise in the zoning component of that, and how do we regulate any of those bad actors?
Oh, I'm going to lean on you for that one a bit. That's a more technical.
Right. Yeah. That is really Andrew's sort of. He's got more of the expertise on the hard issues of that. But again, there's going to be issues that we'll need to talk with your zoning people about to understand what are some of the issues, because the issues when it comes to different types of licensees, there's going to be issues that haven't come up. Like, you don't want necessarily people walking down the street and seeing the giant 6-foot plants. So there's a question of, you know, visual barriers. There's a question of odors. There's a question of traffic coming in and out and knowing what that's like. One of the big issues that is really, you probably haven't contended with, is the fact that a lot of this is a cash business. And so, you know, there's security issues that come up when large amounts of cash are being collected, transported, deposited, that sort of thing. And so we walk through what are some of the big issues. We look, you know, we'll work with your zoning department to find out, well, what are the areas? How are you zoned? You know, what are your different zoning, you know, areas, whether it's light industrial,
sure,
and that sort of thing. And a lot of the issues are going to be ones that where they haven't really thought about this aspect of the cannabis industry.
Sure, I'm sure, you know, the council is going to give direction as far as, you know, what that looks like, right? With regards to potential businesses in business for cannabis, and they're going to be required to, you know, have an armored truck pick up their cash and be able to secure that, be able to, you know, secure their facilities. That's all going to be requirements, obviously. What does the application cost? What should the cost be for applicants applying for a license here in the city? What do you think that cost should be?
It's really hard to know what the exact dollar amount. It would be inappropriate for us to throw out a dollar amount without getting more acquainted to the types of license structures you'd like to see. But I think that I just want to preface this all to say that every contract we engage with starts with an issue spotting and an assessment, whether or not it's written into proposal or not, because we can't do our job if we don't thoroughly understand and communicate with your city and your city council members. So these are the type of things that would take place in a kickoff meeting. Alan, do you have any thoughts on immediate ideas on licensing fees?
No, I mean, there are, you know, there's certain limits that are put in by the state's, you know, regulatory framework, and that is one of the challenges is coming up with a, you know, fees that are based on your actual administrative costs as opposed to just creating a barrier for entry. And that's also particularly important when it comes to, you know, having a social equity aspect where you're opening the marketplace to as many people as possible. And so I think we would do an analysis and look at similar size cities in California to figure out what the, you know, what the regulatory costs are there as well.
Just passing on some information, there's been consultants saying anywhere between 10 to 12,000. So just an FYI to you. I'm not sure what your research would encompass, but just off the bat, these are what some folks are saying in the same line of work that you do. With regards to community benefits, what would the community benefit and cost amount be per applicant? Would you have a disclosure that says basically that they would need to provide a community benefit? How much do you think that should be?
Other cities for the community benefit or good neighbor plans or et cetera, do have that as a qualifying criteria in their application process as well. I don't know that we've seen a hard figure on these things other than like 50% of your staff should be employed of disproportional impact, things like that, or within the city limits type of thing. I know that doesn't exactly answer your question, but I just want to reiterate it actually feels inappropriate to me to give you hard answers on these things without thoroughly knowing and investigating your system. I understand that other consultants might feel a different way, but our cost structure also isn't dependent on these things. So I just want to be transparent that it would feel a bit inappropriate to mislead you in any direction.
I can appreciate that, but that would be something that I would want. And I'm sure there's other council members that feel the same. The experiences out there, for instance, in the city of Los Angeles and other cities have implemented a community benefit, a benefit that speaks to a dollar amount that they would be required to give back to the community to benefit the police, the fire, education, and those that are in need, especially the homeless community. And I could go on and on. It could be anywhere from 100,000 a year and or commitments to give back to the baseball team, the volleyball team. But that's the kind of thing that I would like to ultimately see in a consultant having grasp all of the, not only the benefit, but the community education and ongoing communication with the community. But what's most important is that the community here in the city of Hawthorne know that we're doing our due diligence and making sure that we're not only implementing some good requirements for a good cannabis program, but we're also feeling good that the consultant has our ears and more importantly, what the desires are of the council to have in a good cannabis program ultimately. So all of that is important. I have some other questions that I'll let some other council members ask, and Mayor.
Anybody else wanting to ask questions?
I have just one question.
And then we'll go to Council Member Reyes English again. Go ahead.
What would you do to support the city of Hawthorne in making sure we aren't supporters against litigation, essentially?
Sure, this is our specialty. I'm glad you asked this question. I will defer to Alan, who is the non-practicing attorney, because I am not a non-practicing attorney. So Alan, please.
Well, I mean, again, the biggest issues that come up over and over are the fact that if you have a competitive application and you make the criteria too open to sort of open-ended interpretation, that's where it falls apart every single time. Basically, everybody who is an unsuccessful applicant who has an 84 is going to sue if you give a license to the person who's got an 85 or an 86, because they're going to challenge how that was done. And often cities think that they can sort of offload this to an outside firm, whether it's an accounting firm or a consulting firm, and say, well, we've created these standards, but we're giving this other group the duty of applying those standards. But that is not, that's not a real way of doing that. We've been able to get several places off the ground successfully by focusing on, there should be set minimum standards. Do you meet these basic minimum standards? And if there are too many at this point, if there are too many interested applicants, you then kick it into a lottery system, or you use other other points, whether it's licensing fees or whatever, to sort of winnow it down to the fact that it's a cut and dried answer and there's very little to be challenged. Again, it's the other big thing, and I don't think that you can go down this road at this point in California, is that a lot of places have tried to limit outside people from coming in, which is just, that's just an automatic, it's basically an automatic injunction.
Okay.
And so what we've tried to do is structure things so that interested applicants have an incentive not to try to get an injunction, because they know that there are other licenses coming down the pike, whether you don't say, okay, we have 3 licenses and that's it, we're done. You stagger them, and so then the unsuccessful applicants are waiting for the next time, and they don't want to be the spoil sport who takes the whole thing down in flames. So.
Oh, I'm sorry, but that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Anybody else?
Yep.
So we can.
A couple more.
Okay, a couple more. Okay. What's the population of Hawthorne?
All right.
I believe it was 87.
87,000.
Well, it's probably 95. Because
it's growing. It's growing.
Yeah.
I just give it, that's what it says in our little sign. You mentioned earlier when I asked what types of licensing, and you said retail, cultivation, you said lounges, but I'm not necessarily feeling that. But that's something maybe someone didn't think of, right? What do you think about medical pass-through delivery? What do you think about labs?
Oh, if you can get a lab in your city, absolutely. I think that's beneficial for everybody, including the industry, including public health and safety. I know the state would be appreciative. I know that having communicated with the state that, and with consulting with every state, that the pitfall is always labs. So however, it is hard to attract and entertain labs. But if you have a relationship and we're entertaining the idea of establishing a lab, that would be, personally, as a public health professional, that would be ideal.
Okay, I have 2 more questions, and that would be it, Mayor. We'll wrap it up.
Okay. Go ahead.
I just want to be fair with the questions, because I did similar questions
Yes,
to everybody. Please don't feel
absolutely.
less. This is just directed to you. I did this to everybody.
For sure. Let's do it.
I want to know what makes you suited for Hawthorne, and if selected, would you be implementing a hiring plan with your team?
Sure. I'll say that what makes us suited for Hawthorne, one, is that I'm in Los Angeles. I'm very local. I would be project director, and I would be happy to be boots on the ground. In fact, I would prefer to be, understanding that times are unprecedented and that might not be the case, as well as Johanna, who's only an hour and a half away. That's one thing. The other thing is that this is our sole area of expertise. We've cultivated so much of it that we've grown a practice around it. This isn't something that we just decided to dip our toe in. This is our primary area of consideration and passion. Third, I think that I know that we are one of few consulting firms in this area that have never been mentioned in litigation, have never entertained or had a city or state that we've consulted on sued for something that we've given advice on. That's important for us to say out loud, because the reality of it is that there are competing interests in this very litigious space, and it's important that we just say that. So I think that's what makes us quite unique. Also, we come from a public health and equity background. As far as your second part of your question, which was, if you could just remind me.
It had to do with a hiring plan in place.
Sure. Yeah. So this is, we were actually saying on the line previously, before being able to join the main room, that we really need to start looking for more people, because what if, we both had to step away at the time we were being brought into the room. It's not an uncommon request that we submit a staffing plan or a hiring plan to whatever contract we're being brought onto. We had to do that to Detroit as well, which included a commitment to diversity and equity. Within our own staffing plan. It's something that we've been needing to do regardless. So I think that this would just be an added benefit in our staggering our capacity.
Yeah, no. thank you for your sincerity and honest answers. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Cannabis public policy, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you so much for being here and spending time and answering our questions.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you.
We're grateful.
Awesome.
All right, have a good evening.
You too, thanks.
Have a good night. Have a good night, because I think
Right,
it's past 6 o'clock.
You're right, you're right.
I didn't mean anything by that, guys.
All right.
All right, bye-bye.
I know.
All right. Okay, thank you. Have a good night. Greg?
Yes, Eric, if you could bring in SCI Consulting Group. They are the last group. They did have a couple of their team members that had to temporarily step away, and they plan on joining the group in the room at about 6:30.
Okay, you want us to take a break?
So what happened?
You want us to take a break until 6:30? That there's several folks that are coming on board at 6:30. You want us to just continue?
Well, are there any of them? Why did they?
Not available.
Yes, they were in the holding room. They they had a future commitment from 6 to 6:30, not knowing it would go this long, but they will return back into the room.
All right, we got four members, right?
4. So they did say that you could.
Let's go. Keep going.
Okay.
So SCI, if you could please introduce yourselves and then provide a little background on your company, and then the council will then begin the interview process.
And if you guys could be, like you said, if some of the members that couldn't join, just let us know and try to represent as best as possible the answers that they might have been able to answer.
And they'll be back at 6:30 also.
Oh, okay. Can you go through your introductions, please?
Sure. So good evening, Mayor Vargas, members of the council. My name is Kyle Tankard. I'm a senior consultant here at SCI Consulting Group and also our cannabis business service leader for our cannabis service department. So a little background on SCI Consulting Group. So we're a public finance and urban economic consultant firm here in California with over 35 years of expertise assisting public agencies up and down the state with policy and planning services and additional revenue services as well. In addition to that, we provide a complete suite of local cannabis policy implementation services to cities and counties here in California. To date, we have assisted roughly 30 cities in about 6 counties with various stages of implementation services related to cannabis. And in addition to that, we have teamed up with several firms. So I would like to introduce each of them to you. So from PlaceWorks, we have Tanya. So Tanya, can you please give a little introduction?
Hi, my name is Tanya Sundberg. I'm an associate principal with PlaceWorks, and we'd be working on the zoning and land use and CEQA aspects of the project.
Thank you, Tanya. And then also on our team, we have Yvette McDowell. Yvette, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Yvette McDowell, and I am with Yvette McDowell Consulting and part of the SCI team. I bring to the background, I'm a retired assistant city prosecutor and a firefighter paramedic for the city of Pasadena. I've spent a lot of time involved with equity since the inception. That is my area of practice with law. That is all I do. I have the pleasure of being on the board of directors for the California Cannabis Industry Association, also a part of the newly formed Los Angeles County Bar Association, their cannabis section with equity. I chair that. I also co-chair what we call the Diversity, Inclusion, Social Equity Committee for the California Cannabis Industry Association, or known as CCIA. I also co-chair the Equity section for the International Cannabis Bar Association, and I'm a part of the National Cannabis Bar Association, their equity committee as well. So I've spent a lot of time dealing with equity, watching equity, and being part of the respective organizations. It's given me an opportunity to look at all of the cities that offer equity programs, to evaluate, to assess what's going on right, what's going on wrong. Talking to the equity applicants in particular, I spent a lot of time doing that. I am a boots on the ground person, always have been since I've been involved in the industry at the end of 2017. And I find that that is where your best education is, in learning about equity, the applicants, what they're going through, what they need, what they're missing. So I want to bring all of that experience and perspective to the city of Hawthorne and set up one of the best programs that there has been in terms of equity, because at this point in time, I have not seen anything in my practice where equity is really to be looked at and envied. So I believe that that's what this team will bring to the city of Hawthorne. So thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. And then lastly, we have David representing the Poon Group.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Yes, my name is David Sears. I am with the Poon Group. The Poon Group is a public accounting firm. We've been in business well over 20 years. We mainly focus on governments, cities, counties. I would be the manager and lead on the audit portion of this contract to take a look at the licensees to verify that they are indeed paying their fair share of their tax revenue tax to you guys.
Okay, thank you
All
so
right.
much.
And thank you, David. And also joining us is Arcelia Herrera from STI Consulting Group. And then our president of our firm, John Bliss, he actually had to jump off to attend another meeting, but he'll plan on joining us around 6:30 if we're still going. So that's kind of the introduction. You know, SCI has worked with a variety of cities, small, medium, and large. You know, we pride ourselves in rolling up our sleeves, you know, working with city staff, conducting the community outreach, and understanding, figuring out what a city or county needs in terms of needs and wants in terms of cannabis businesses in their city. So that's kind of the overview of our firm. So happy to take questions now.
Okay, so I'll start off on behalf of Mayor Pro Tem Olivia Valentine, who needed to step away. I'm asking her questions first so that we make sure we offer her that courtesy that her questions were asked.
Okay.
So the first question is, it's important that our staff be trained so that they can take over all aspects of the cannabis operation, including the enforcement, so we can kind of do that in-house. So we receive training from you. What will you do to facilitate that training?
Great question. So with virtually all of our clients in some form, we have, you know, trained staff to take over either the application process, whether that's reviewing applications or just the processing and permitting, but also the monitoring compliance process. We're currently working with the City of Merced, training their planning staff to conduct inspections. So we have provided one-on-one meetings with staff, teaching them how to conduct inspections, teaching them what to look for when inspecting a variety of facilities, and also having those staffs come with us on inspections and conducting those inspections with us. So as I mentioned, for virtually all of our clients in some form, we have trained staff along the way to eventually take over these cannabis programs. And of course, you know, for any areas that the city still needs our work, we're there to provide those services.
The second question is from Mayor Pro Tem Valentine. Community engagement and outreach is critical to involve and educate the communities, right? So we want to let the community know. So what experience have you had in this type of effort, and how would you accomplish this in the city of Hawthorne?
This is another great question. So I 100% agree. You know, community outreach, education, and getting that feedback from the constituents is probably the single most important first step of this process. And, you know, first that begins with, you know, sitting down with city staff, the city council, and asking, what does your community want? And from there, we'll develop our outreach plan. We have developed a plan, you know, for virtually all of our clients, which includes, you know, stakeholder meetings, larger community type meetings, and more recently we have engaged in one-on-one stakeholder meetings for cannabis equity work that we're doing for several cities. Given the challenges with COVID, we're experienced with conducting virtual community meetings. So essentially, you know, we're prepared to develop a outreach plan that suits the needs of the city and go from there. And Yvette, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. One of the things that I found to be extremely important is to set up something called a community table, which is made up of potential social equity applicants in the community, and maybe some of the, if you have neighborhood councils or neighborhood watch associations, set up that table, because that way you get a true assessment of the needs and direct access to the community by those who were impacted by the war on drugs, those who were impacted from distance. They are your best sources of information. They are the best connections to the community. So when you set this type of a structure up, you're able to teach them how to go out into the community and start setting up roundtables, start the educational process, because community members are going to listen to community members. They know, like, and trust people that they see on a regular basis. So coming in and doing things like that is one of the most important things that we can do. Involve the community from day one that you come in, and set them up to go out and teach people. This is what's going on here. Help them understand things. And doing that, you find a lot more success in what you do.
Thank you, ma'am. And this last question is my question, and I know it's come up for all of the applicants, asked by my council member colleagues, and I asked it last time. Social equity programs. Basically, it seems like a big old buzzword, like everybody uses it. Do you have a social equity program? And everybody says, yeah, we can do it. And it seems like, for me personally, I've been hearing people just say it just to resonate with, you know, when applying to these positions. But so I haven't seen any concrete examples of anything work. I've researched it, and so the community and including the community benefit aspect, to be honest with you, everybody says that's their way to get in. Okay, so I would like for you to speak frankly as well, and just tell us the reality of where those two concepts are at.
Absolutely. And frank is what you will get from me. From where I sit and what I have seen, I cannot put my finger on one social equity program that is to be modeled at this point in time. And as I indicated, because I sit on these different association, either boards or staff the social equity committees, it gives me an opportunity to hear from all the various applicants in the various cities. And there is not one who has said that we have the model thing working here. And that is understandably so, because when you deal with social equity, again, it's sort of a microcosm of a whole bigger plan and bigger structure. And as such, you have to engage the community of social equity participants or potential applicants. And you need to really find out what those needs are through an assessment. And when you can do that, you can build the infrastructure. That has been, in my belief and opinion, has been the number one failure with these programs, is the lack of having an infrastructure put in place from the beginning. This is not, and it should not be, build the plane as you're flying it. You just don't have the luxury to do that and try to avoid potential litigation. So let's put an infrastructure in place for sustainable businesses. And when I talk about that, I talk about bringing in the experts, because I work with a team of people, investors, compliance individuals, tax and accounting, management, HR, security, business plan experts. That's just to name a few of the numerous things that's going to be required for a social equity applicant. And unless you have that stuff in place, you're simply going to be spinning your thumbs, hoping that you do it the right way. Let's do it the right way up front and avoid a lot of the potential litigation, which again is part and parcel of my job, is to help get it set up where we can avoid this type of thing from happening. I've seen enough in all of these cities. I've been intimately involved in the city of Los Angeles from the inception of social equity. I know why the lawsuits were filed. I've spoken to the attorneys ad nauseum involved. I've spoken with the equity applicants ad nauseum. So I know what these things are. And that's what, so let's make Hawthorne become a model city.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. Anybody else would like to ask questions? Let me see who's raised their hands. Anybody would like to ask questions?
Yep.
Okay.
To the chair, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, thank you, CSI Consulting, for coming before us and for your proposal. There was some things I was trying to, some words that were mentioned that I was trying to capture just to make sure I didn't lose my place. But Ms. McDowell, you had me all on what you were saying because it was so on point with regards to equity, I can't even say it anymore.
It's been a long day.
It's been a long day. And I've been saying it over and over again, but you get what I'm saying. Diversity and all of that. That's all very important. It's important for myself. It's important for this council and this body. But you did make mention of a good program, social equity assessment study in your program. Makes mention of providing data informed that looks at the history of the city. And I just spoke on this earlier, but you know, that the impacts of the illegalization of cannabis and what it includes is, you know, analysis of poverty and Hawthorne Police Department statistics. So how do you gather that? How, for not being in our city, not maybe knowing our city, right? How do you do that? How do you quantify data that helps you understand what our little city has been going through with regards to economic development, to housing, to businesses, and those challenges alike that today the city council seems to be stuck? I mean, I think the full body of the city council wants ultimately the city to prosper, longevity, forecasting, way beyond after we're gone. But how do we do that with the cannabis program, with everything that you made mention on data, information, you know, disappropriate impact, cannabis criminalization, you know, you mentioned all of this. I get it for the city of Los Angeles because it's a larger city, you know, and I work for the city of Los Angeles. I'm there every day. But how do you quantify that here in our city of Hawthorne? And especially, you know, with regards to the other question is the outreach component, the outreach to the people that live here, that have an opinion every day. Trust us. We hear them when they call city council and give us their pros and cons, grievances, and dislikes. And, you know, cannabis is not a popular item right now. but the voters did pass it in November with over, I believe, Councilmember Montero, 60% or something like this. It was a
61%.
Yeah. What was that?
61%.
A very high margin. I'm not trying to rush into things just because it was on a ballot and it passed, because I think a good cannabis program takes time to implement. So can you give me some history on your data, how you're going to do that, quantify that, how are you going to engage community? What is it that you're going to help us with in those areas?
Absolutely, council member, and thank you for that question. There's a company out that does the social equity analysis, and they look at police reporting districts to get an idea of the number of arrests for cannabis convictions, whether they're felonies, misdemeanors, and compiling all that data, also looking at what's considered low income areas, looking at poverty level, bringing all of those statistics to the table so the council can then make an informed decision on the type of program that you want to offer. That is critical as you move forward, to have that assessment, to look at all of those different things. And when you speak of reaching out to the community, again, this is where the initial advertising comes in to bring about something like a community table. And again, that community table, that's where you're going to get your best assessment for reaching the needs in the community. A lot, as you said, a lot of people don't like cannabis in their communities. They don't know enough about it. Education is key, key, key. What I love to do is bring in resources that I have access to for educational purposes. But again, utilizing those in the community to get things out there, because if they want to be a part of the industry, I find that they are very eager to get the truth out there and not have people stuck in the what I call the reefer madness era of spreading disinformation and lies out there. So if we could use that assessment, which again, they put together some great statistics, which really helps you decide how do you want to go. And secondly, so important to sit down with you as members of the council to find out, what do you want to see the cannabis program in your city look like, in order to be able to really structure that. And when that happens, it keeps you in the loop from every step moving forward. It keeps you educated. It keeps you being able to say, we like this, we don't like this, we need to change this. How do we do this? But keeping you in the loop at every step. It's critical to do that. Your input is necessary with this in order to make it work, as well as the community and how you set it up.
You made mention that you would do like 4 outreach efforts from what I saw in your booklet. Ms. Herrera, I'm hoping there's bilingual Spanish involved, literature material that's going to be ultimately, resourceful for those that don't speak the language. What would you say? Which license are more beneficial and least impactful?
Is that directed at me, council member?
Whomever. It's a licensing issue, so a licensing question. Licensing question.
Yeah, sure.
Which license are most beneficial and least impactful to our city?
Yeah, so that question really depends on the goals for the city of Hawthorne and the goals of your constituents, what they want in their city. So if your main concerns are revenue, I would say, generators and revenue are the most obvious is retail locations. Retail locations as well as cultivators. Some of the least performing businesses in the revenue aspect would be the testing facilities. While they are a very important business in the supply chain, responsible for testing all the product that reaches the retail market for consumption by consumers, their margins are slim, and so they don't tend to bring in the revenue dollars for cities.
You would say that those would be the most retail and cultivation?
Yeah, retail, cultivation, and manufacturing. I would say those are your main, your main three. Distribution, not to look past that one. Typically in the supply chain, it's the one least taxed. They're essentially the middleman in this process, transferring product from licensee to licensee, and ultimately transferring that product to retail locations for sale to consumers.
And maybe to Mrs. Sundberg, the question around zoning. How should zoning work so that certain developers don't monopolize and are, artificially inflate the control, the industrial zone areas that ultimately the city will be assigning?
Sure. Yeah, so I think the zoning is going to give you the ability to have some say in how these uses are developed and how they might impact their neighboring uses, and also where they're developed, including obviously the industrial zones are the most common zoning districts that local agencies are looking to for a lot of these uses. I think a lot of the concerns about monopolizing locations and things like that would actually it could be part of your zoning code. It also could go into your kind of business and the business code, just limiting the number of permits that would be issued to a single entity or a single person that's involved in those entities. There's also some limitations we can do through zoning that would allow the city to kind of avoid concentrations of uses, which can in turn kind of avoid those kinds of monopolies from happening. So having a buffer requirement between uses is an example of that.
Okay. What formula do you use on the number of retail the city should have or consider?
Sure, I'll take that one. So essentially, there's a formula up and down the state that's commonly used. So typically, that's based on the population of the city. So I think the population of Hawthorne is roughly 90,000 there. Typically, the state standard is between one retail location for every 10 to 15,000 residents. However, there's other factors to consider as well. You want to factor in the cities around you that may come to the city of Hawthorne to purchase cannabis as well. So, we'll take a look at other cities around you that have implemented retail locations, but also with delivery services and their ability to go outside the city limits and deliver product. So we'll take all those factors into consideration when, if asked to make a recommendation on the number of retail locations.
Okay. Councilmember Patterson and then Councilmember Montero.
Hey, could you just give me a little bit of clarity about the size of your team?
Sure. So here at SCI Consultant, we're a firm of about roughly 18 to 20 people. In cannabis, primarily we have 5 consultants that are dedicated to cannabis work. And then I will turn it over to David to just kind of give an overview of the Poon Group.
Yes, the Poon Group is roughly 35 professional accountants. We have offices in Northern California, Southern California, and Arizona, as well as an office in Las Vegas. But for the team that would manage most of the cannabis practices, that would be myself, the main partner, Ken Poon, and another partner, Vanessa Burke. And I have a multitude of staff below me to help perform the audits of the licensees after they have been licensed.
And then Tanya, can you give a quick overview?
Sure. PlaceWorks has about 120 employees. We're dispersed throughout the state. And we have a number of staff who can assist with this project, but we have identified a team of about 4 of us that would be likely to work on it. That includes Charlie Knox, who's our principal and leads our zoning practice, myself, and then we have 2 key staff both that provide both the kind of zoning and any GIS needs you might have or CEQA needs to help with the project.
So I'm gonna understand this is a collaboration between 3 firms.
That's correct.
Got it.
I'm sorry, actually 4 firms with Yvette as well.
And council member, I work with approximately 7 individuals who are strictly committed to social equity. And that's in the form of investors, tax and accounting, social equity applicants, and education. We develop curriculum for the social equity applicants and do the training.
Got it. Appreciate that. I just have one last question. What would you say would be the biggest thing that we should be paying attention to in trying to bring an ordinance and a program like this to the city?
You know, I think the biggest thing to consider, if the city values the importance of equity, equity should be the foundation of everything you do with cannabis. And Yvette, if you want to expand a little bit on that.
Absolutely. You know, mitigating lawsuits is number 1. And when you look at equity coming in, yes, you are going to have people who don't think equity should have priority processing. At the same time, equity is utilizing investors from the traditional business world. Depending on how you as a council want to set it up in your city, do you want to have X number of licenses designed for social equity, X number designed for non-equity applicants? So it depends on what you want to do, but primary is to mitigate litigation and put a program in place that is going to touch all the segments, but do it in an equitable way. So I just believe when you operate in that manner, and that is why when I said it is so important to hear the intention of the council before you move forward and just start throwing things in place. I, in particular, love to work with our city attorney offices. It's a background I come from. I've worked with law enforcement at length. I know how to interface with these folks, and that's what I do, you know, to make sure that we are all on the same page at the same time for the right reasons.
Appreciate that.
And then just to kind of build on that, you know, another important factor is, you know, we want to balance public safety, the safety of your residents, but also sustainable businesses for the benefit of those business owners, but also, you know, to the city in providing, you know, sustainable revenue to the city as well.
Councilmember Montero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, ladies and gents, for coming. I'm glad that Mr. McDonald mentioned about a blended type of program for the cannabis program for Hawthorne, because we're not talking about just social equity program. So it will be a component of our program. That's my goal. So it will be like a blended model that we will do. I want you guys to clarify for me, because when I look at the page 7, you mentioned several cities in California, like Alameda, Mercedes, Richmond, and then on page 8 you put some other cities. So explain to me, you know, these 4 cities, no, actually, you know, about 5 cities that you guys mentioned that is relevant to the project, and in relation to the other cities that you have worked in the past.
Yes, so essentially, under the relevant projects, the city's RFP was broad in scope. So we wanted to, represent, the services we provide. So we picked clients that, dealt with implementation, dealt with application review, dealt with social equity to show that, these are services that we can provide to the city of Hawthorne. In terms of the full list of clients you saw on page 8, I believe you said, those are all the cities and counties we have worked to date. So, some of these were full implementation starting from the ground up. Others could have been one-off where, we did application review for the city of West Hollywood. And other monitoring compliance services such as inspections, as well as financial and tax audits.
Let's talk about a little bit about the city of San Bernardino, because what we have heard is that San Bernardino did have some litigations. You guys were part of that process?
No, so we were actually hired after that process. So essentially, when we took over, the city had gone through their permanent of their retail locations, and essentially we took over the process from there to provide plan check services, background checks on their current business owners, as well as annual compliance inspections.
And financial audits.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
And you would say that, you would come in for certain amount of hours or months, and then you guarantee us that our staff will pick up the pace of the job when you leave. Is that something that you guys are committed to?
Yes, we're fully committed to that. So whatever, services that the city needs to get staff up to speed and trained, we're there to provide those. Typically when we first sit down with city staff, we'll go over the project scope and also give, what we call Cannabis 101 presentation. And so that's essentially an introduction and overview of cannabis implementation, the state regulations, and examples of how cities have implemented elsewhere in the state. So that's a part of our education process that is typically given to staff as well as council and the general public. As I previously mentioned, we are in the process of training staff in other cities to take over compliance inspection services. So to answer your question, we are here to provide, any service that the city needs and help you achieve those goals. So.
I saw on your page 17 on your budget, proposed budget, right? One of the highest costs of the program, it would be the ordinance development. But we do have, planning department and also a city attorney's office. Is that something that could be negotiated? Because if we have some people that are expert in doing ordinance and planning development?
Yeah, certainly. I would say definitely these prices are negotiable. We tried to give our best guess estimate on, based on the information provided in the RFP. So definitely.
Okay. So now the last question for Ms. Yvette. I'm going to put you on the spot there, because you said that you have gone across, looking at all these social equity programs. I want you to comment on, because it's coming across, research that I have done, that Oakland is one of the social equity programs that has been successful, has not have no litigation. So can you talk about that?
Oh, absolutely. Because they have not had any litigation doesn't mean the program is successful.
Okay.
That is going to be determined by the actual applicants. If they're up and running, and that's what I always say, are your doors open? Are you bringing clients in? Are you generating revenue? Because if you're not doing any of that, then where is the success? Yes, there have been certain things that have opened up in Oakland. It's oh, I forget what it is. I know the young
Co-op?
lady who runs it. A co-op, yes. And I know her very well. As a matter of fact, she's part of the diversity inclusion committee that I co-chair. And so we've had lengthy discussions with that. She's one person that I know. But again, when I start seeing multiple applicants say that my business is open and it's flourishing, that's what I look at as being successful. Not saying that everything Oakland does is wrong, because I don't believe that, but success is determined by who's running their business, who's open, who's generating revenue.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, city council members, and thank you to your group for presenting. We really appreciate you being here. And if you can send greetings to your director, your founder, who I don't know if was able to join us, but just let him know that we acknowledge his being here earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Appreciate the opportunity,
Council.
and
Thank you.
look forward to
Thank you.
hearing back soon.
Okay, council colleagues, let's establish what the next step of the process is. I think at some point we need to deliver this. Greg, who are we supposed to deliver the choices to? To you or to
Oh,
the city
I
manager?
believe you need to sit down. I thought your next process was, because the Mayor Pro Tem being absent, that you would arrange another meeting to discuss.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
So I think a date and time is in order for you to meet.
Okay, so I think we have an overabundance of special meetings, to be frank with you guys. I know this is important, but we need to join this up with whatever other special meeting we have that's already existent. I think, I don't know, does anybody else have any comments on that?
Yeah, I agree. We have too many meetings. So we can put this in the back of another meeting. And had a meeting about choosing the final three.
And the reality is that I do have my day job as well. Like I think Councilmember Patterson, that some of my council member colleagues are afforded flexibility because of the nature of what.
Mr. Mayor, let me give you just an idea.
Oh well, I'm not finished with my statement, but yeah, for sure.
I know you're finished with your statement on Monday.
No, I'm not finished with my statement, Councilmember
Okay.
Montero. I mean,
But all of us have jobs.
no, we all have jobs, but there's some flexibility. That I don't have.
for that.
So I think everybody's impacted in some way or other.
Yeah.
Bottom line, that's what the conclusion is. So let's just determine when the next time we can have a meeting. We have we have 2 or 3 special meetings next week that we could just add this on there.
what I'm
Mr.
saying.
City Attorney, do we have the flexibility of adding this onto one of our other special meetings? So we could sit down at one of those
Monday
times?
the 17th.
Oh, is that okay, sir? So
Monday the 17th, we have the a meeting with the planning department and Mr. Beck. So it would be a natural occurrence.
that's
We can add on that agenda.
Okay. How long do you guys expect that meeting to be? The only reason is I have an appointment at 5 myself. I would like to do it that soon.
Well, we can say, for example, the meeting between Mr. Beck and the department should go from 3 to 4, 1 hour. It doesn't have to be long because they're just going to present some conversation about the mall, right?
Okay.
And then from 4 to 5, the cannabises. That's it.
Mr. City Attorney, is there a way where we can just combine them for the same special meeting notice? Add this on there?
Okay, so I see.
The reason I'm
my
saying
calendar-
is, I don't want to, if in case we end earlier with the meeting with Mr. Beck, it would be great if we could just continue into this next topic. Do you guys see what I'm saying?
Okay, but I have, I don't know if this what's more correct. I have on the 17th, the Hawthorne Mall meeting as a special meeting at 11 a.m. Did we change the time?
I think it's at 3.
As at 3 o'clock.
At 3.
Is it 3?
Yes, on the 17th.
Yeah, it's at 3.
The 19 is at the 11 with the mall owners.
Okay, I got those two mixed up.
Yeah, the 19 is at 11 with the Armaga Bay and the Charles Company. On Monday is at 3 o'clock.
Could we add this as an item to that special meeting, Mr. City Attorney?
Yes, we could. I'm trying to figure out how much notice we're giving for the agenda and when.
It's a special meeting. It's only 24 hours.
Yeah, but we gotta give notice to the clerk's office. Yeah, so we should be fine. We should be able to add something onto that special agenda.
Yeah, yeah, Mr. The priority was Mr. Beck. That could go first, and then we could put this after. Just get the right wording and just put it on there, please.
Okay.
And then everybody will be happy, right?
Sounds like a plan to me.
Can we, to the chair,
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
can we try and keep meetings for next week, not to go beyond the 19th? Because I'm not going to be available until the next council meeting after that.
Okay. And let's try to come up with criteria that we maybe state at the beginning, just so we can have the meetings a bit, like towards the end, we were able to be efficient with our meetings and we had a hang up like how we wanted to push it. So
yeah, and the same thing with Miss English. I'm not going to be available from the 21st until June 1st.
I don't have any special meetings in mind. I don't know if you No, but look, we're getting a lot of things done. We're getting a lot of things done, so that's good. It's a very important time for us. So we're doing really good. Thank you guys. All right. If there is nothing further from my council colleagues, am I missing anything, Mr. City Attorney, on the agenda?
No, I don't believe so. I think we only had this item on the agenda for today.
Okay, so if there's nothing further from my council colleagues, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Good night. Bye. Thank you.
Of your household in both public and private spaces. Wear a cloth face covering. Before you put it on, wash your hands or sanitize them. Before you take it off, make sure your hands are clean. And after you take it off,